Chapter 2360. Along the way, Chu and Shui Yinling continued to collect information and had a deeper understanding of the Great World. This Great World was called the Phaseless Great World. Within the Phaseless World, there were 10 top forces. The first was called the Phaseless Palace, and it was a force created by a demigod sovereign. The other 9 forces were created by powerful sovereign realm experts. Mammoth City was one of them, and it was ranked 9th. The Great World's way of heaven was more complete than the main world's higher boundary. It was easier for cultivators to reach the Great Emperor realm and the Sovereign realm. However, it was different for demigod sovereigns. Almost every Great World's way of heaven could only accommodate one demigod sovereign. Only some powerful and special Great Worlds could accommodate 2 demigod sovereigns. Although a higher boundary was not as big as a Great World, the main world formed by countless boundaries was far more powerful than any Great World. Its way of heaven was endless, so it could accommodate more demigod sovereigns. This was also the reason why the Deity Clan and Demon Clan tried to occupy the Origin World. The Phaseless Palace was a special sect. It focused on the Array Doctrine. The demigod sovereign who created the Phaseless Palace had become a demigod sovereign through the Array Doctrine, a sect that focuses on the Array Doctrine. Chu Mu's eyes flashed. He had dozens of myriad heavenly swords. Although he could freely control them with divine controlling sword technique to attack or defend, if he wanted to use them to their fullest potential or even surpass their limits, he needed better techniques. The Array Doctrine was the most direct type. The mystery of the Array Doctrine was that it could make a weak person stronger. Chu Mu had been considering whether to learn the Array Doctrine. However, he had not made a decision because it would divert his time and energy. Chu Mu, I think you can enter the Phaseless Palace to learn the Array Doctrine and apply it to the all-heavenly swords, Shui Yinling suggested. Chu Mu expressed his concerns. The 2 of them decided to go to the Phaseless Palace to see the situation before making a decision. The Phaseless Palace was the top sect in the Phaseless world. Not just anyone could enter it. Chu Mu and Shui Yinling were not from the Phaseless world, so it would not be easy for them. Of course, Chu Mu wasn't willing to start from humble beginnings. That would be a waste of time. They came to the Phaseless Giant City under the Phaseless Divine Palace. The Phaseless Giant City's city lord was a deacon of the Phaseless Divine Palace. After entering the Phaseless Giant City, Chu Mu and Shui Yinling quickly obtained a lot of information, one of which was very useful to Chu Mu. Within the Phaseless Giant City, there was a tall pagoda known as the Phaseless Sky Pagoda. It was rumored that the Phaseless Sky Pagoda was a treasure left behind by the sovereign demigod who founded the Phaseless Divine Palace. The pagoda was 49 floors high. The Phaseless Sky Pagoda contained profound mysteries. Anyone was qualified to challenge it. Moreover, if one could reach the 9th floor, they would be qualified to become a disciple of the Phaseless Divine Palace. The higher the floor, the more attention they would receive from the Phaseless Divine Palace. The Phaseless Divine Palace was the top sect in the Phaseless world. It was the only sect that no one could compare to. Even if the 9 great forces were combined, their foundation would still be inferior to the Phaseless Divine Palace. Countless people wanted to become a disciple of the Phaseless Divine Palace. However, the Phaseless Divine Palace was very strict when it came to recruiting disciples. There were clear restrictions on talent and age. They also recruited disciples according to the year they were recruited. Many people who wanted to join the Phaseless Divine Palace were rejected by the Phaseless Divine Palace. However, the Phaseless Divine Palace was not so ruthless. They left behind a glimmer of hope, which was the Phaseless Sky Pagoda. No matter who it was, as long as they could reach the 9th floor of the Phaseless Sky Pagoda, they would be qualified to become a member of the Phaseless Divine Palace. It was said that someone had once reached the 20th floor of the Phaseless Sky Pagoda and caused quite a stir. He was directly recruited by the Phaseless Divine Palace and became an important member. Now he was already a famous array Tao master. Not only did many people who wanted to join the phaseless divine palace come to challenge the phaseless sky pagoda, even many disciples of the phaseless divine palace would come to challenge it. As long as they performed outstandingly in the phaseless sky pagoda, they would also receive the sex attention and receive rewards or promotions. Moreover, it would also be beneficial to them. Challenging the phaseless sky pagoda had nothing to do with cultivation or strength. It was purely related to the Tao of arrays. In other words, to challenge the phaseless sky pagoda, one would need to have a certain level of attainments in the Tao of arrays. The phaseless sky pagoda might be an opportunity for me. Chumu said, as long as he could reach a higher floor, he might be able to become a more important member of the phaseless divine palace. He wouldn't need to start from scratch and would save a lot of time. In the end, whether or not he wanted to join the phaseless divine palace was one thing. As for this phaseless sky pagoda, Chumu was actually interested in challenging it. However, sharpening the axe wouldn't delay the work of chopping firewood. Before challenging the phaseless sky pagoda, Chumu still needed to make some preparations. In the Tao of arrays, he had a certain level of foundation, but it wasn't profound. The phaseless giant city was a city under the phaseless divine palace. The Tao of arrays was very popular, and it was even divided into many different schools. The division of schools was generally related to the method of setting up arrays and the understanding of arrays. For example, some methods of setting up arrays were as swift as lightning, some methods of setting up arrays were like trickling water, and some methods of setting up arrays were as complicated as the stars. This gave birth to many different schools. Chumu bought a large number of books related to the Tao of arrays. However, they were all relatively basic. The truly profound Tao of arrays required inheritance, such as entering the phaseless divine palace and so on. Although it was just the basic Tao of arrays, it was very popular because the phaseless divine palace was the strongest force in this world. Entering the phaseless divine palace was like ascending to the heavens in a single step. Furthermore, the phaseless divine palace was a sect that focused on the Tao of arrays, which led to the prevalence of arrays in the giant city. There were a total of over 100 books, and each book represented a type of Tao of arrays. Chumu relied on a certain foundation of Tao of arrays to flip through one book after another. With his super memory, he memorized all the contents in the books, and with his astonishing perception, he quickly comprehended and mastered them. Not long after, Chumu finished reading over 100 books on arrays. He also memorized and mastered them all. In a short period of time, his attainments in the Tao of arrays had increased by a lot. I'm going to challenge the phaseless sky pagoda now, Chumu said after finishing his preparations. Then he went to the phaseless sky pagoda with Shui Yinling. The 49-story, phaseless, shrouding sky tower was the tallest building in phaseless giant city. Each floor was exactly 490 feet tall, totaling up to 2,410 feet. It was the landmark of phaseless giant city. There were many people around the phaseless sky pagoda. Some of them were waiting to challenge the pagoda, while others were watching the fun. Chumu and Shui Yinling discovered that there were 3 490 feet tall black stone tablets next to the phaseless sky pagoda. There were a total of 49 names on the stone tablets. They were arranged from top to bottom, and after each name, the number of floors was displayed. With a glance, Chumu and Shui Yinling knew that the function of the stone tablets should be to display the names of the challengers and the number of floors they had reached. However, one of the stone tablets was for statistics. It was the best result of all challengers in the history of the phaseless sky pagoda, which was only 49 people. The other stone tablet was updated every 49 years. It also recorded the names and results of the 49 most outstanding people who had challenged the tower in the past 49 years. The third stone tablet also displayed 49 names. After the names, it also displayed the number of floors that corresponded to the number of floors that the person had reached. When the person who had challenged the tower left the non-phase covering Sky Tower, the number of floors displayed on the third black stone tablet would be the final number of floors that the person had reached. However, if one wanted to challenge the pagoda, they couldn't compete. They had to get a pagoda token. Chu Mu received a pagoda challenge token that recorded his name. On the back of the pagoda challenge token was a number. Simply put, he had to wait in line and enter the formless covering Sky Pagoda one by one. Chu Mu looked at it. The pagoda token was updated every 49 days. His number was 1,560. There were more than 300 people waiting in front of him. According to the calculation, only 49 people could enter the pagoda at a time. Moreover, it took a certain amount of time to challenge the pagoda. At the very least, he had to wait for a while. He still had to wait for a while. It would take at least a few days, or even longer. Chu Mu and Shui Yinling watched for a while and then turned to leave. They had to travel around the city first. Everything one saw, heard, and experienced was a kind of training. Any method could become a kind of accumulation. The most important thing was one's mentality. The phaseless giant city was very big. Chu Mu and Shui Yinling didn't show their cultivation. They walked on the street like two ordinary people. Sometimes, when they smelled tempting fragrances, they would go and buy some food. When they saw something nice, they would stop and look at it for a while. It was very leisurely and comfortable. However, after a while, Chu Mu and Shui Yinling began to realize that some people were looking at them differently. They looked at them strangely, as if they were looking at prey. That's the two of them. They dared to provoke the Giant Elephant Clan. How audacious! The Giant Elephant Clan issued a bounty for them. It means that they either have an extraordinary background or extraordinary strength. They are not easy to deal with. They look so young. Even if they are geniuses, they are at most third-step great emperors. No matter what, since they're wanted by the Mammoth family and the Mammoth family has offered such a high price, we have to act quickly. First, we have to send the news to the Mammoth family, then find an opportunity to capture them and hand them over to the Mammoth family to deal with. Their discussion didn't escape Chu Mu and Shui Yinling's ears. Because their six senses were amazing, they could hear it easily. Chapter 2361. Fighting wasn't allowed in the phaseless giant city. This was a rule set by the phaseless palace. Even the phaseless palace's members didn't dare to violate it, let alone others. Therefore, Chu Mu and Shui Yinling were very safe in the phaseless giant city. The giant elephant family was one of the top 10 forces, but they were far inferior to the phaseless palace. Naturally, they didn't dare to make a move in the phaseless giant city. However, the giant elephant family had a lot of weight. They directly requested the phaseless palace to expel Chu Mu and Shui Yinling from the city. As long as they were out of the city, the giant elephant family's experts would immediately capture Chu Mu and Shui Yinling. As long as the two of them don't violate the city's rules, we won't expel them. An elder of the phaseless palace responded to the giant elephant family's expert. Our giant elephant family is willing to pay a sufficient price. The giant elephant family's peak sovereign realm expert said. Moreover, according to our investigation, the two of them aren't from the phaseless world. They came from the outside world. They killed our giant elephant family's people the moment they arrived. They clearly don't put the experts of this world in their eyes. Nothing can be accomplished without rules. No means no, the elder of the phaseless palace said. He wasn't stupid. Why did they only kill the giant elephant family's people and not the others? It was obvious that the giant elephant family had a conflict with the other party. With a single sentence, they wanted to drag the phaseless world's people into the water. Did they really think the others were fools? The phaseless palace had been able to stand tall since the ancient era and never be surpassed. Apart from being established by a demigod sovereign, it was also because they abided by relative rules, especially the rules that they had set themselves. The giant elephant family's expert was furious when he saw that the other party wasn't affected by his provocation. However, He didn't dare to vent his anger. This was the Phaseless Palace. The difference in foundation between the giant elephant family and the Phaseless Palace was huge. If they offended the Phaseless Palace and had a conflict with it, the giant elephant family would be the one to suffer. This was because the giant elephant family was created by a sovereign realm expert, while the divine Phaseless Palace was created by a half-god sovereign. Their foundations were completely incomparable. Although the members of the giant elephant family had left the Phaseless Palace, they remained in the Phaseless giant city. Their eyes were fixed on Chumu and Shui Yinling. As soon as Chumu and Shui Yinling left the Phaseless giant city, they would immediately capture them and bring them back to the giant elephant family. Chumu and Shui Yinling could feel it too, but they didn't care at all and continued to play in the formless huge city. Some of the upper echelons of the Phaseless Divine Palace also looked at Chumu and Shui Yinling. They wanted to see who they were or whether they would harm the Phaseless giant city. Time flew, and Chumu and Shui Yinling arrived at the Phaseless Sky Pagoda again. There were not many people in front of Chumu, which meant that it would be Chumu's turn soon. At that moment, a silhouette flashed and appeared at the bottom of the Phaseless Sky Pagoda. After a name on the third black stone tablet, the number of floors appeared. 7th floor. 7th floor. That wasn't up to the standard of the Phaseless Divine Palace. Not bad. You've reached the 7th floor. That's an improvement. That person was disappointed at first, but then he smiled. Last time he had only reached the 5th floor, which meant that he had made progress. Moreover, he had learned a lot in the pagoda. If he spent some time in the pagoda, he might be able to reach the 9th floor next time and become a member of the Phaseless Divine Palace. After that, more and more people appeared outside the pagoda, and the number of floors appeared on the third black stone tablet. There were a total of 49 people, and all of them had appeared. Among them, there were 3 people who had surpassed the 9th level, and the highest one had reached the 11th level. Many people were looking at them with envy. As for these 3 people, their faces were filled with excitement because they had worked so hard for so many years and they could finally enter the formless Divine Palace. Entering the Phaseless Divine Palace wasn't just a symbol of status. It was also a place to learn more formations. Very quickly, the disciples of the Phaseless Divine Palace took the 3 of them away. The next batch of people entered the Phaseless Sky Pagoda, and Chumu was among them. Oh, he's going to enter the Phaseless Sky Pagoda too. Could it be that he has some attainments in formations? Whether it's true or not, we'll know when he comes out of the pagoda. The experts of the Phaseless Divine Palace were secretly observing Chumu and Shui Yinling chatted secretly. With the pagoda token in his hand, the power of the pagoda token and the pagoda's power connected. Chumu's body turned into a ray of light and flew towards the pagoda. In the blink of an eye, Chumu appeared in a dark space. He felt that his cultivation was completely suppressed, and he couldn't use it at all. The Phaseless Sky Pagoda is a test of formations. It makes sense for them to be worried that someone would forcefully enter the pagoda. Chumu thought to himself. He wasn't worried at all. In the Phaseless Giant City, he and Shui Yinling had done some research on the Phaseless Sky Pagoda. Not long after, the darkness retreated, and it was as if day had arrived. Chumu appeared in a small room. The room was empty, but Chumu could see that there was a formation set up in the room. Break the formation in time, and you can go to the 2nd floor. A deep voice sounded and disappeared in an instant. An hourglass appeared out of thin air, and the fine sand began to fall bit by bit. It represented the passage of time. Chumu understood the meaning behind it and observed it carefully. He had a certain level of attainment in formations, and he had bought hundreds of books on formations in the giant city. He had read all of them, and his attainment in formations had improved further. Moreover, he was a great perfection, sovereign realm expert. His experience was far beyond his peers, and he had a deeper understanding of the mysteries of the universe. With all these factors, Chumu's attainment in formations was still at the basic level, but he had amazing potential and plasticity. As long as he had enough knowledge of formations, he could improve rapidly. The higher a cultivator's cultivation base was, the easier it was for them to learn new knowledge. One law could lead to 10,000 laws, and any mystery was included in the mysteries of the universe. The higher a cultivator's cultivation base was, the clearer their understanding of the mysteries of the universe would be, and the stronger their learning ability would be. With just a glance, Chumu saw through the mysteries of the formation in the room, and a way to break it appeared in his mind. However, Chumu wasn't in a hurry to break it. Instead, he was thinking about how to improve the formation and make it more profound and powerful. Deciphering array formations was a compulsory course for every array formation cultivator. As the saying went, destruction was easier than construction. Deciphering array formations was easier than setting up array formations. Within the phaseless sky pagoda, there are countless formations. By breaking one formation after another, one could go up level by level, displaying a cultivator's attainment in breaking formations. With such profound attainment, it would naturally be easier to learn the Tao of formations. Everyone who entered the phaseless sky pagoda had the goal of going to a higher level. No one was willing to stay at a lower level. It had to be known that there was a time limit. If one couldn't break the formation after the time limit, it would be equivalent to failure and they would be sent out of the pagoda. Chumu judged that the sand in the hourglass could last for about an hour. For anyone with attainment in formations, an hour was more than enough to break the first level of the formation. There might even be a lot of time left. Chumu wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he was thinking about how to improve this formation. This formation was a very low-level one, very basic. Time slowly passed. The other 48 people had already entered the second level. The more powerful ones had already entered the third level, and even the fourth level. That Zhou Cheng is so powerful. How long has it been? He's already reached the fourth level. Of course, he's a legacy disciple of the phaseless sect. His attainment in formations is outstanding. It's natural for him to be in the lead. Who is that Chumu? He's still at the first level. Isn't his attainment in formations a little too weak? On the third black stone tablet, there were 49 names. The level after Chumu's name was the first level. Looking at the others, they were at least at the second level. The person with the highest level was Zhou Cheng, who was at the fourth level. No, he had already reached the fifth level. He was completely in the lead, leaving the others behind. Shui Yinling took a glance, but she wasn't worried at all. She knew that Chumu's ability was outstanding. There must be a reason why he was at the first level. Looks like we've overestimated him. Yeah, we've overestimated him. This person might be from the outside world. He's interested in the phaseless sky pagoda and wants to experience it personally. He doesn't have any attainment in formations. He's not worthy of our attention. The experts of the phaseless palace who were secretly observing Chumu said. Their attention towards Chumu suddenly decreased. Let's wait and see. Originally, they planned to leave, but after thinking about it, they decided to stay and observe the situation. In the first level of the phaseless sky pagoda, Chumu was still perfecting the basic formation. He had already perfected it twice and upgraded it twice. Now he was going to perfect it for the third time. Unknowingly, Chumu had forgotten the passage of time. Although his attainment in formations wasn't high, it was still better than many people in the phaseless giant city. Coupled with his high cultivation and the experience he had gained from his travels in the chaotic universe, it took him a short time to perfect it for the first time. But the second time was longer, and now the third time was even longer. When Chumu perfected the formation for the third time, the formation had been upgraded to a whole new level. It wasn't inferior to the formations on the fourth or fifth level. In the cultivation of formations, perfecting a formation was a relatively high level. Without a certain level of attainment in formations, it was impossible to do it. Oh no, it's almost time. Chumu glanced at the hourglass and quickly cracked the formation in the room. Then he automatically entered the second level. Chapter 2362. On the third black stone tablet of the phaseless sky shrouding pagoda, Zhou Cheng's name was at the top. He had already reached the 8th floor. Below him was a person called Li Shuqiu, who had reached the 7th floor. She was also a legacy disciple of the phaseless sect. Among the 49 people who had entered the pagoda, 2 of them were legacy disciples of the phaseless sect. Their limelight had instantly suppressed the others. The third person had reached the 6th floor, while the rest had either reached the 6th or 5th floor. Even the worst had reached the 4th floor. Only Chu Mu's name was at the 2nd floor. It's only the 2nd floor. What is this person doing here? Wasting time. If he can't do it, then hurry up and come out. He's an eyesore. Many people were unhappy and roared. Xue Yinling ignored them, and Chu Mu naturally wouldn't hear them. It seems like there's really nothing to look forward to. A few experts of the Phaseless Palace said, "Since there's nothing to look forward to, let's go back." After speaking, the figures disappeared into the crowd. Let's guess which floor this Chu Mu will fail at. I guess the 3rd floor. I guess the 3rd floor as well. The 4th floor. The 4th floor at most. The 3rd floor has the highest possibility. He might not even be able to pass the 2nd floor. In the 2nd floor of the faceless covering sky pagoda, Chu Mu perfected the formation again. However, he perfected it by constructing a model in his mind and not by actually perfecting it. This was because he was worried that if he actually perfected it, it would cause some unfavorable changes. The 2nd floor's array was more advanced than the 1st floor, and the difficulty of perfecting it was also higher. However, Chu Mu had a certain level of attainment in array Dao. Adding to the fact that he had perfected the 1st floor 3 times in a row, his array Dao had improved slightly. Therefore, the first perfecting of the 2nd floor wasn't difficult. The 2nd perfecting, the 3rd perfecting. When the sand in the hourglass was about to fall, Chu Mu hastily broke the array. His figure flashed and appeared on the 3rd floor. The rooms on every floor of the phaseless covering sky pagoda were more or less the same. The only difference was the array formations. The higher one went, the more profound the array formations were. However, Chu Mu still didn't directly break the array formations. Instead, he studied the array formations. After studying the array formations and knowing how to break them, he began to simulate and perfect the array formations. The 3rd layer's array was more advanced than the 2nd layer's. It was more difficult to perfect it, but the time required to do so had not increased. This undoubtedly increased the difficulty of deciphering the array. Of course, for most people, the 3rd layer's array was not that difficult to decipher. This time, Chu Mu perfected it 3 more times. He almost didn't have enough time, but he smiled. The 1st layer's array formation was the simplest. After perfecting it 3 times, the time was almost up. The 2nd layer's array formation was also perfected 3 times, and the time was almost up. Now the 3rd layer's array formation was also perfected 3 times, and the time was also almost up. Calculating the time required to perfect the array formation 3 times was about the same. This meant that Chu Mu had made progress in the array Dao. After entering the 4th layer, the 1st place, Zhou Cheng, had already reached the 10th layer. The 2nd place, Li Shuqiu, had reached the 9th layer. To the phaseless sect's legacy disciples, this result was nothing much. However, the 3rd place was only on the 7th layer. The gap was starting to show. For most people who studied array formations, it wasn't difficult for them to pass through the first 3 layers. However, there were many who stopped at the 6th layer. There were fewer who could reach the 9th layer. The 4th layer's array formation was more advanced, and the difficulty of perfecting it had increased by a lot. However, Chu Mu continued to perfect it. After barely perfecting it 3 times, he immediately broke the array formation and entered the 5th layer. At this moment, Zhou Cheng had entered the 11th layer, Li Shuqiu had entered the 10th layer, and the 3rd place had entered the 8th layer. As for the others, they were all on the 7th and 6th layer. The gap between Chu Mu and them was unknowingly shrinking. That Chu Mu actually reached the 5th layer. Unbelievable. It can't be dog shit luck, right? Time slowly passed. In the blink of an eye, another half an hour had passed. On the black stone tablet, after Chu Mu's name, the number of layers changed again. It was the 6th layer, and it instantly caused a wave of exclamations. At this moment, of the 49 names on the black stone tablet, a portion of them were still on the 6th layer. In other words, they were easily ahead of Chu Mu, but now Chu Mu had caught up to them. After a while, a figure flickered and appeared outside the tower. At the same time, a name on the black stone tablet emitted light, indicating that this person had failed to pass through the tower and had stopped at the 6th layer. Damn it, that person's face was ugly. He had prepared for a long time to pass through the tower, but in the end he was only on the 6th layer. After a few more minutes, another 2 people left the phaseless sky tower. One stopped at the 6th layer, and the other stopped at the 7th layer. As time passed, more people were sent out of the phaseless sky tower. More than half of the people were sent out, and the number of layers after Chu Mu's name changed again. It was the 7th layer. From the beginning, he was at the bottom. Gradually, he caught up with the others and even surpassed them, which caused another wave of discussion. What's wrong with this guy? Too strange. Everyone was puzzled. Under normal circumstances, it was so difficult to pass through the first 3 layers, which meant that his array skills were very ordinary. There was no hope for him to continue. But now he had reached the 7th layer, which was really puzzling. Could it be that he wasn't focused on breaking the formation earlier, but was doing something else instead? Only when the time was almost up did he make a move to break the formation. That's possible. Regardless of whether it was belittling or praising, it couldn't affect Xue Yinling or Chu Mu. The corner of Xue Yinling's mouth curled up slightly. She knew that Chu Mu's ability wasn't that bad. The array on the 7th layer became more advanced, and it was harder to break. Chu Mu spent some time to find a way to break it, and then perfected it. Not only was it harder to break it, but it was also harder to perfect it. After perfecting it twice, Chu Mu hurriedly broke the array and entered the 8th layer. At this time, Zhou Cheng, who was at the top, had reached the 13th layer. The second, Li Shuqiu, had reached the 12th layer. The third, Zhou Cheng, had reached the 9th layer. There were only 2 people who had reached the 8th layer, but now Chu Mu had reached it. There were 10 people on the 7th layer, and the rest had all failed and left the phaseless sky tower. The 8th layer. That's really unexpected. Everyone exclaimed. Chu Mu's performance could be said to be full of stamina. They began to look forward to it. I wonder if this Chu Mu can reach the 9th layer. That might be possible. Yeah, if he can reach the 9th layer, he can become a disciple of the phaseless palace. As soon as the sentence was said, many people immediately revealed an envious look. Reaching the 8th layer doesn't mean that he can reach the 9th layer. Maybe he will be sent out later. Someone said coldly. His tone was sour. It was the person who had failed the tower and was sent out. The array on the 8th layer was more advanced. Chu Mu had only perfected it twice, and the time was almost up. He had to break the array and enter the 9th layer. After he entered the 9th layer, it immediately caused a commotion. The 9th layer was the phaseless palace's recruitment criteria. In other words, even if Chu Mu couldn't pass the 9th layer, he could still enter the phaseless palace and become a disciple. Once he became a disciple of the phaseless palace, he could learn more advanced array Dao. Among the crowd, the experts of the giant elephant family who were staring at Chu Mu revealed ugly expressions. This is bad. And if this person reaches the 9th layer, he can enter the phaseless palace and become a disciple. At that time, he will receive the protection of the phaseless palace. The giant elephant family was indeed powerful, but they didn't dare to go against the phaseless palace. Act according to the circumstances. This person dared to kill our giant elephant family's people. No matter what, we must eliminate him. Don't worry, even if he reaches the 9th layer and is recruited by the Phaseless Palace, he will only be an ordinary disciple and won't receive too much attention. We still have a chance. Indeed, the majority of the people thought that reaching the 9th layer and entering the Phaseless Palace would allow them to achieve meteoric success. In fact, the 9th layer was only the lowest standard. If they entered the Phaseless Palace with the result of reaching the 9th layer, they would only become an ordinary disciple. Only if their performance was more outstanding would they receive more attention. Otherwise, within the Phaseless Divine Palace, there were countless disciples. Who would pay attention to an ordinary disciple? Of course, to many people who were unable to enter the Phaseless Divine Palace normally, reaching the 9th floor of the Phaseless Sky Shrouding Pagoda was an extremely good thing. Chu Mu reached the 9th layer, and the first place, Zhou Cheng, reached the 14th layer. Li Shuqiu reached the 13th layer. Looking at their momentum, it seemed like they could continue to reach higher levels. The original 3rd place couldn't reach the 10th layer after reaching the 9th layer. When the time was up, he was sent out of the Phaseless Sky Pagoda. However, since he reached the 9th layer, he was qualified to enter the Phaseless Palace. As for the original 8th and 7th layer, they also failed and were sent out of the Phaseless Sky Pagoda. In the end, there were only 3 people left in the Phaseless Sky Pagoda. The first place was Zhou Cheng, second place was Li Shuqiu, and third place was Chu Mu. Zhou Cheng and Li Shuqiu could still continue to go up. This was within everyone's expectations. After all, as the Phaseless Palace's true disciples, they could at least reach the 15th layer or even higher. What was completely unexpected was Chu Mu. His performance was terrible at the beginning, but he slowly rose up. Until now, he was still challenging the Phaseless Sky Pagoda with Zhou Cheng and Li Shuqiu. Could it be that he still wants to reach the 10th layer? Someone muttered. The difficulty of the 10th layer was higher than the 9th layer, and it was even more difficult. The treatment of entering the Phaseless Palace on the 10th layer was also different compared to entering the Phaseless Palace on the 9th layer. On the 9th layer, Chu Mu perfected the array twice. After breaking the array, his figure flashed and entered the 10th layer. Chapter 2363. On the 3rd black stone tablet, the floor after Chu Mu's name was displayed as the 10th floor. He really entered the 10th floor. I didn't expect him to be able to enter the 10th floor. Within the crowd, cries of surprise rose and fell one after another. The experts from the giant elephant family had ugly expressions on their faces. Previously, they were still saying that even if one entered the Phaseless Divine Palace after passing the 9th floor, he would only be an ordinary disciple and wouldn't receive any attention. However, it was different for those who passed the 10th floor. They would receive more attention. Now that Yi Shiwen had really passed the 10th floor, it was like an invisible slap to their faces. The 10th floor's array was upgraded once again. Chu Mu carefully comprehended it. Unknowingly, the comprehension of the first 9 floors had increased his attainments in the Tao of arrays by quite a bit. Not long after, Chu Mu found the method to break the 10th floor's array and began to perfect it. His comprehension ability was unparalleled, which gave him a huge advantage in comprehending array formations. In addition to his high cultivation base and the things he had seen during his travels, he had accumulated unlimited potential in the Tao of arrays. Now, it was time for this potential to be slowly released. Within the Phaseless Sky Shrouding Pagoda, the array formations were upgraded layer by layer. While breaking the array formations, it would also increase one's attainments in the Tao of arrays. Of course, this kind of improvement wasn't particularly obvious, but it was better than nothing. However, Chu Mu was different. Not only did he break the array formations, he also perfected them. Compared to others, his harvest was at least 10 times more. Naturally, it would allow his attainments in the Tao of arrays to increase by leaps and bounds. If others were to do the same, They might not be able to improve as much as Chu Mu because Chu Mu's foundation was extremely shocking. Zhou Cheng's floor changed again, entering the 15th floor, while Li Shuqiu entered the 14th floor. After nearly an hour, Chu Mu finally managed to perfect the 10th floor's array twice. However, he wasn't very satisfied with the second time. Since there wasn't enough time, he had no choice but to break the array formation and enter the 11th floor. The 11th floor. Exclamations of surprise rang out one after another. Chu Mu's name had attracted a lot of attention, even more so than Zhou Cheng's and Li Shuqiu's. Thus, any change in his name would be immediately known. The 11th level. The experts from the giant elephant family had ugly expressions on their faces. If it was said that the phaseless palace would place some importance on the 10th level, then the importance of the 11th level would increase by a little. The higher the importance, the higher the amount of protection one would receive, and the harder it would be for the giant elephant family to get rid of the other party. That's great. Once you enter the phaseless divine palace on the 11th floor, you'll definitely be valued. Many people were endlessly envious. After reaching the 15th floor, Zhou Cheng's speed slowed down significantly. Li Shuqiu's speed also slowed down. No matter which floor they reached, the time was the same. They only had an hour. The higher the floor, the harder it was to break the array formation. Many people weren't powerless to break the array formation, but they weren't able to break the array formation within the time limit. If they were given more time, it wasn't impossible for them to reach a higher floor. However, this was the rule of the phaseless sky pagoda. If they wanted to challenge the pagoda, they could only abide by it. After an hour, Chu Mu managed to perfect the 11th floor's array twice. Just like the 10th floor, he wasn't satisfied with the second time. After breaking the array formation, the number of floors changed again. The 12th floor. Astonishment. Everyone was even more astonished. The disciples of the phaseless palace were divided into ordinary disciples, elite disciples, true disciples, and core disciples. They didn't place much importance on cultivation. Their attainments in array Tao were the most important. Of course, it would be easier for cultivators with high cultivation to learn array Tao. By reaching the 9th, 10th, and 11th floor of the phaseless sky pagoda and entering the phaseless palace, one could become an ordinary disciple. The higher the floor, the easier it was to stand out among the ordinary disciples. However, reaching the 12th floor had an obvious difference. That was, one could directly become an elite disciple of the phaseless palace. The number of elite disciples in the phaseless palace was less than the ordinary disciples. However, the treatment they received was much better than the ordinary disciples. It was two different levels. Moreover, elite disciples had the qualifications to be apprenticed to a master. That was to say, the elders and other higher-ups of the phaseless palace. Of course, having the qualifications to be apprenticed to a master didn't mean that one would definitely succeed. It still depended on whether the other party would accept them or not. However, at least there was hope. The difference between having an apprenticeship and not having an apprenticeship was also very obvious. When learning and cultivating by oneself, one would sometimes have to ponder over a difficult problem for a long time and spend a lot of time to verify before finally finding the correct path. Unknowingly, a lot of time would be wasted. However, if there was someone to give pointers, such a difficult problem would only require a few words from a senior master to quickly comprehend it. It would save a lot of time to study and comprehend more profound knowledge. The experts from the giant elephant family felt that their faces were about to be slapped swollen. If the giant elephant family wanted to touch an elite disciple, they would definitely have to pay a huge price. Send this news back to the family. The leader of these experts, a peak sovereign realm expert, said in a low voice. He had no choice but to send this news back and wait for the family to make a decision. On the 12th floor, Chu Mu first broke the array. This was to be prepared for any eventuality. The 12th floor's array was much more profound. The difficulty of breaking it had increased slightly. After breaking it, Chu Mu once again perfected the array. time slowly flowed by as fine sand fell from the hourglass. Unfortunately, I can only perfect it once. There isn't enough time for a second time. Chu Mu said inwardly. The difficulty of perfecting the 12th floor's array was even higher. After Chu Mu perfected it once, there was still some time left. However, it wasn't enough for a second time. However, he wasn't in a hurry to break the array. Instead, he continued to stare at the array and slowly deduce it. He did his best to seize every minute and second to improve his attainments in array Tao. When it was about time, Chu Mu once again broke the array. His figure flashed as he entered the 13th floor. The 13th floor. What is he trying to do? He actually reached the 13th floor. This is unbelievable. On the other hand, Zhou Cheng had reached the 16th floor. Li Shuqiu had reached the 15th floor. The difference between Chu Mu and them was originally 6 floors. Now it was only 3 floors. It was constantly closing in. One had to know that both Zhou Cheng and Li Shuqiu were true disciples of the Phaseless Palace. They had been cultivating in the Phaseless Palace for many years. Moreover, they had been apprenticed to a master and received guidance from an array master. Their attainments in array Tao were extraordinary. However, this Chu Mu wasn't a disciple of the Phaseless Palace. Even if he self-studied array Tao, it shouldn't be comparable to a disciple of the Phaseless Palace. After all, the Phaseless Palace was the only sect in this world that focused on array Tao. Moreover, it was a sect that was founded and passed down by a demigod sovereign. The 13th floor. It seems like there will be another miracle. The last time someone who wasn't a disciple of the Phaseless Palace passed the 12th floor was 6 years ago. It's the 13th floor. I wonder if this Chu Mu can reach a higher floor. Do you think it's possible for him to reach the 15th floor? The 15th floor? Impossible. If one could reach the 9th floor, they would be qualified to become an ordinary disciple of the Phaseless Palace. If one could reach the 12th floor, they would be qualified to become an elite disciple of the Phaseless Palace. If one could reach the 15th floor, they would be qualified to become a true disciple of the Phaseless Palace. Compared to the elite disciples, a true disciple status was one level higher. The treatment they received was also much better than the elite disciples. Once Chu Mu reached the 15th floor and became a true disciple of the Phaseless Palace, the possibility of the giant elephant family wanting to kill him would be close to zero. However, they were powerless to stop him. They could only watch as Chu Mu challenged the tower. In their hearts, they hoped that he would be sent out of the tower as soon as possible. A quarter of an hour after Chu Mu reached the 13th floor, the floor number behind Zhou Cheng's name changed. It reached the 17th floor. A few minutes later, Li Shuqiu reached the 16th floor. If Zhou Cheng could reach the 18th floor, he would be qualified to become a core disciple of the Phaseless Palace. That was a rank above true disciples. However, the difficulty was too high. Even Zhou Cheng himself didn't have much confidence. As for Li Shuqiu, reaching the 16th floor was already an improvement for her. She didn't have much confidence in reaching the 17th floor. As for the 18th floor, it was an extravagant hope. Another quarter of an hour later, the floor number behind Chu Mu's name changed again. The 14th floor. Heavens, this Chu Mu is too shocking. He actually went up again. Could it be that he's really going to reach the 15th floor? The crowd exclaimed in surprise. They were excited once again. If Chu Mu could reach the 15th floor, it would definitely be another miracle. One had to know that it wasn't easy for non-members of the Phaseless Palace to reach the 15th floor. In the past few decades, other than the Phaseless Palace's members, no one else had reached the 15th floor. That was equivalent to a true disciple of the Phaseless Palace. Perhaps someone would be able to do it today. Not long after Chu Mu entered the 14th floor, Zhou Cheng's name flashed and he appeared outside the pagoda. The final floor number was the 17th floor. The 17th floor. Just a little bit more, and I'll be able to reach the 18th floor. Zhou Qing clenched his fists and said unwillingly. In the end, he sighed helplessly. He was so close. However, he had gained something from challenging the tower this time. After he went back, he might go into seclusion for a while before challenging the tower again. Then he would be able to reach the 18th floor. Immediately, his gaze fell on the two names on the black stone tablet. He knew of Li Shuqiu, but he had never heard of Chumu. When he thought of the discussions around him, his face was filled with astonishment. After a short while, Li Shuqiu also appeared outside the pagoda. The final floor number was the 16th floor. Her gaze also landed on the only name left on the black stone tablet. Her face was filled with astonishment. Who is this Chumu? Li Shuqiu thought to herself. In fact, it wasn't only Li Shuqiu who had this question. Many people present had the same question. Chapter 2364. Everyone's gaze was focused on the third black stone tablet, on the name that was still stubbornly left on the stone tablet. Chumu. The 14th floor began to flicker. Everyone's breathing became rapid unknowingly. Some of them even subconsciously clenched their fists. They were extremely nervous, as if they were the one challenging the pagoda. There were two possibilities for the flashes of light that represented the number of floors. One was that he had successfully broken the formation and entered the next floor of the tower. The other was that he had failed to break the formation and was about to be sent out of the formless covering sky tower. So, which one was Chumu? Everyone was looking forward to it. Some of them were looking forward to Chumu reaching the 15th floor. That would be a new record for the past few years. It was equivalent to giving hope and strength to those who wanted to enter the phaseless palace. On the other hand, some of them hoped that Chumu would fail. Among them were the giant elephant family and some others who were jealous, although the 14th floor and the 15th floor were only one level apart. The significance was completely different. It was far greater than the 13th floor and the 14th floor. After all, the 13th and 14th floor belonged to the elite disciples of the phaseless palace. The 15th floor surpassed the elite disciples and reached the level of a true disciple. Once Chumu reached the 15th floor and became a true disciple of the phaseless palace, the giant elephant family wouldn't be able to touch him unless they risked the wrath of the phaseless palace. On the other hand, Zhou Qing and Li Shuqiu both had solemn expressions. As legacy disciples of the phaseless palace, they deeply knew how difficult it was to become a legacy disciple. In the blink of an eye, the flickering of the floors ended. Chumu didn't leave the phaseless sky pagoda. The 15th floor. He actually reached the 15th floor. Damn it. He actually reached the 15th floor. All sorts of voices rang out. A smile flashed across Shui Yinling's face. She was stunned. The figure appeared on the 15th floor of the phaseless sky pagoda. The array on the 15th floor was much more complicated than the 14th floor. The improvement was much more profound than the improvement between the 14th and 13th floor. In fact, there was an obvious difference between the 8th floor and the 9th floor. There was another obvious difference between the 11th floor and the 12th floor and the 14th floor to the 15th floor. Chumu began to study the 15th level's array formation and began to crack it. The difficulty of deciphering the spell had clearly increased. The sand in the hourglass continued to fall as Chumu focused on deciphering the spell. It's cracked. Looking up, there wasn't much sand left in the hourglass. There wasn't enough time for Chumu to perfect the formation. Chumu could only give up on perfecting the array formation. However, he used the remaining time to think and deepen his understanding of array formations, gradually increasing his attainments in array formations. A drop of water becomes a river, and hundreds of rivers flow into the sea. Often, little drops make a mickle. When the time was almost up, Chumu began to break the array formation. In just a few breaths of time, the array formation of the 15th level was broken by Chumu. His figure instantly disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already on the 16th level. 16 levels. He made it to the 16th floor. Li Shuqiu's face was solemn. This was the level where she had failed. Zhou Cheng's face was also solemn. He had spent a lot of energy to break through this level. Every level had a different meaning. The faces of several experts of the giant elephant family were as black as the bottom of a pot. They were so gloomy that water was about to drip out. One figure after another silently appeared outside the phaseless sky shrouding tower. Their gazes all landed on the name on the third black stone tablet. Chu Mu, who is this person? He's not a disciple of the divine palace, but he can break through to the 16th floor. His attainments in array formations must be extraordinary. He's wanted by the giant elephant family. Wanted by the giant elephant family? They dare to arrest someone that our divine palace has taken a fancy to. Let's make it clear first. This Chu Mu, our Tianxiang palace, wants him. Do you think we'll take him just because you say so? Our Tianxiang palace wants him. Don't fight. Our Tianxiang palace wants him. No, absolutely not. Last time, Ning Zian, who broke through to the 15th floor, was taken away by your Tianxiang palace. This Chu Mu, our Tianxiang palace, can't have any ideas. These people were the higher-ups of the phaseless divine palace's various palaces. When they received the news, they all hurried over to the phaseless covering sky tower to personally witness the discovery of Chu Mu. Not only did he reach the 15th floor, he even reached the 16th floor. All of them were pleasantly surprised and wanted to receive him into their respective palaces. This was a very simple logic. Outstanding disciples who would want more, because the more outstanding disciples there were, the higher the overall potential and strength. In the future, they could also obtain more resources to further develop and recruit more outstanding disciples, forming a virtuous cycle. Being able to break through to the 15th floor of the phaseless sky pagoda meant that one had the ability or potential of a true disciple and was worth nurturing. Breaking through to the 16th floor meant that one was considered outstanding among the true disciples. And breaking through to the 17th floor meant that one was considered the top among the true disciples. What's the point of fighting now? Wait until this Chu Mu comes out, then we'll ask him for his opinion. At that time we'll compete fairly. An elder from the Tianxiang Palace said. His voice was calm, but there was a unique sharpness to it. That's right. Wait until he comes out. Right now, I'm curious if he can break through to the 17th floor. An elder from the Tianxiang Palace said with a smile. Let's wait and see. The elders of the various palaces fell silent, waiting for the result. On the 16th floor, Chu Mu studied the array to break the array. The array on the 16th floor was much more profound than the 15th floor, but Chu Mu still managed to break it within the stipulated time. Done. Clapping his hands, the array was broken. Chu Mu's figure disappeared again, entering the 17th floor. On the third black stone tablet, the number of floors after Chu Mu's name changed from the 16th floor to the 17th floor. He actually broke through to the 17th floor. Zhou Cheng's mouth was agape. He was extremely shocked, and his face turned ugly. One had to know that he had entered the divine phaseless palace to cultivate for many years, and only after painstakingly working hard did he have today's results. Yet a fellow who came from an unknown place had actually made it to the 17th level. This made him feel extremely displeased, and even his impression of this person became bad. The faces of the few experts from the giant elephant family weren't just simply black. Instead, it was as if large amounts of ink had congealed on their faces. The surroundings were gloomy, causing everyone to unconsciously retreat. The 17th floor. It's really shocking. The elders from the various palaces of the Tianxiang Palace laughed in surprise. Over 20 years ago, Ning Zian only broke through to the 15th floor. Now he has already become a core disciple. This Chu Mu actually broke through to the 17th floor. His potential is even more shocking. I remember that in the last 49 years, other than the disciples of the Tianxiang Palace, no one else broke through to the 15th floor. The highest record was the 14th floor, and in the 49 years before that, there was someone who broke through to the 20th floor. An elder from the Tianxiang Palace said, "This time, there are still 3 years left until the 49 years. Before Chu Mu, there was Ning Zian who broke through to the 15th floor. Now, Chu Mu has broken through to the 17th floor. It's even better than the previous 49 years. I wonder if he can break through to the 18th floor." An elder from the Tianxiang Palace suddenly said, "The 18th floor?" The elders looked at each other. The 18th floor belonged to the core disciples of the Tianxiang Palace. It was extremely difficult to surpass a true disciple. In the last 49 years, there were very few people who were not disciples of the Tianxiang Palace who could break through to the 18th floor. There were only 3. One broke through to the 18th floor, the other broke through to the 19th floor, and the third broke through to the 20th floor. The 3 of them had made great achievements in array Dao. On the 17th floor of the Tianxiang Pagoda, Chu Mu was still studying the array. The difficulty of this array was even higher. He began to feel strained as he studied it. However, he wasn't stuck. Bit by bit, Chu Mu cracked it. Finally, the moment the last grain of sand in the hourglass fell, before the sand had even reached the bottom, Chu Mu completed the final step and the formation was successfully broken. When the last grain of sand fell, Chu Mu's figure was locked by a force and disappeared. Outside the Tianxiang Pagoda, on the 3rd black stone tablet, the number floors after Chu Mu's name flashed again. Everyone's eyes were focused. They were much more nervous than before. This was a crucial moment. It was also a historical moment. In the last 49 years, someone had already broken through to the 15th floor. The 15th floor and the 17th floor belonged to the true disciples. There was a difference, but it wasn't a difference of leaps and bounds. The 18th floor belonged to the core disciples. The difference between the core disciples and the true disciples was very obvious. The significance was completely different. If Chu Mu could break through to the 18th floor, he would become the first person to do so in the last 49 years. His name would also be recorded on the 2nd stone tablet until someone surpassed him. The elders from the various halls of the phaseless palace held their breaths as they stared at the 3rd black stone tablet with widened eyes. As the number of floors flashed, a word on the 17th floor changed. The 18th floor. He broke through to the 18th floor. Too powerful. Where did this person come from? Everyone exclaimed. Their jealousy from before had turned into admiration. This person had already surpassed them by a lot. They didn't have the qualifications to be jealous. Only admiration was left. On the contrary, the experts of the giant elephant family had a mournful expression. Once a core disciple entered the phaseless divine palace, they would become a proper core disciple. Every core disciple would receive the phaseless divine palace's attention, nurturing, and protection. Unless the giant elephant family was courting death, they wouldn't provoke them. In other words, it was very likely that the dozens of great emperors and the sovereign realm expert of the giant elephant family had died in vain. No, immediately send the news back to the family. The leading sovereign realm expert quickly said, Chapter 2365. This array is actually so profound. On the 18th floor, Chu Mu didn't know that he had already caused a huge commotion in the outside world. He was completely immersed in studying and deciphering the array. Compared to the array on the 17th floor, the array on the 18th floor was obviously much more profound. It was like a leap between 2 levels, making Chu Mu feel that it was extremely difficult. He did his best, using everything he had learned and everything he had gained from the phaseless sky pagoda, but his progress was still slow. The sand in the hourglass continued to fall, becoming less and less, representing the passage of time. Gradually, an hour was about to pass. I wonder if he can pass the 18th floor and enter the 19th floor. An elder from the Earth Phase Hall said in a low voice. The others also had the same thought. From the beginning, no one was optimistic about Chumu because his progress was the slowest. But they didn't expect him to be a big dark horse, slowly climbing up. When others failed to leave the pagoda, he was still able to continue, creating one miracle after another, causing exclamations after exclamation. In the end, he left an incomparably deep impression in everyone's hearts. Previously, many people hoped that he could pass the 17th floor and enter the 18th floor, but they also knew that it was incomparably difficult. Now that Chumu did it, it inevitably gave people hope and expectations. Past the 19th floor, the 19th floor also belonged to the core disciple level, but compared to the 18th floor, it was equivalent to the comparison between the more outstanding core disciple and the more ordinary core disciple. If one could pass the 20th floor, it would be equivalent to the top core disciple level. Until now, in the past 10 years, only one person who wasn't a disciple of the phaseless Divine Palace had passed the 20th floor, and there were many people challenging the pagoda every day. One could imagine how shocking the difficulty was. Time slowly passed. The anticipation in everyone's heart grew stronger. Unknowingly, an hour passed. Chumu's name flickered. Everyone was first stunned, then they revealed a disappointed expression, or they sighed heavily. Their emotions were indescribably complicated. With a flash of light, a figure appeared outside the phaseless sky pagoda. It was Chumu. The name on the third black stone tablet was Chumu, 18th floor. Immediately after, one of the names on the second stone tablet began to flicker and release a radiance. Gradually, it began to change. This name was at the top of the list. When the radiance finally disappeared, what was revealed was Chumu's name and the number of floors he had passed. The other names fell down in order. Then, one of the names on the first black stone tablet released light, also changing. Everyone's gazes were drawn over as they stared fixedly at him. The 49 names recorded on the first black stone tablet represented the highest record for non-members of the phaseless Divine Palace in the history of the phaseless Sky Pagoda. The name at the top of the list was Tang Tianhong, and the number of floors behind it was the 24th floor. The 24th floor. This was no doubt a shocking record. The person in second place was called Yu Jianfeng, and the level he had reached was the 23rd level. The fourth place was the 21st level. On the first black stone tablet, there were only 4 people who had reached the 20th level and above, for who had reached the 20th level, 31 who had reached the 19th level, and 10 who had reached the 18th level. The flashing name was one of the last to reach the 18th floor. Chumu's name and the floor number appeared, while the flashing name sank, and the names below it also fell in order. 43rd. Chumu had almost been able to successfully break through the formation and enter the 19th level. Unfortunately, due to a slight difference in time, he had no chance of entering the 19th level. In the end, he was only ranked 43rd on the first black stone tablet. However, being able to be listed on the first black stone tablet was already a great acknowledgement. His name would remain on the tablet for many years until it was pushed down again and again. Most likely, it would take a very, very long time for that to happen. The few experts from the giant elephant family had shocking killing intent in their eyes as they stared at Chumu. They wished they could tear him to shreds, but they didn't dare because this was the phaseless giant city. Once they made a move, they would infuriate the phaseless Divine Palace and bring a calamity to the giant elephant family. The phaseless Divine Palace could be said to be the ruler of the phaseless world. Normally, it was very stable and didn't participate in any resource fights or conflicts. However, no one dared to provoke it. Following that, one figure after another seemed to walk out of the void, emitting a power that forcibly repelled the surrounding people. They appeared in front of Chumu, each and every one of them looking at Chumu with joy and excitement. That gaze seemed to want to see through Chumu. "Chumu, I'm Elder Tianmuzi of the Phaseless Divine Palace's Sky Phase Hall. I'm here to welcome you. The Sky Phase Hall's elder took the initiative to speak first. Chumu! I'm Elder Wu Hongzi of the Phaseless Divine Palace's Phaseless Hall. Our Phaseless Hall is the head of the 6 halls of the Phaseless Divine Palace. We have the most abundant resources. As long as you join our Phaseless Hall, you will immediately become a core disciple and enjoy all the benefits of a core disciple. The Phaseless Hall's elder hurriedly spoke. Wu Hongzi, we've already agreed. This time, the Phaseless Hall cannot participate in the competition. The Earth Phase Hall's elder said angrily, if it's the true disciple level, my Phaseless Hall can indeed not participate. However, Chumu has reached the 18th floor. That's the level of a core disciple. The Phaseless Hall's elder Wu Hongzi sneered as he retorted, I'm Elder Wu Yuanzi of the Phaseless Divine Palace's Human Phase Hall. Chumu, you're very suitable for our Human Phase Hall. The Human Phase Hall's elder also spoke. Even though he really hoped to recruit Chumu, his expression was still calm, as if he was recuperating. Chumu, I'm Long Shanzi of the Phaseless Divine Palace's Dragon Phase Hall. My Dragon Phase Hall is in charge of the 4-phase mountain. Come to my Dragon Phase Hall, and I promise to give you a chance to enter the 4-phase mountain. The Dragon Phase Hall's elder Long Shanzi also tried to persuade Huang Xiaolong. Shortly after, he seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly explained. The 4-phase mountain is an extremely important sacred ground for arrays in the Phaseless Divine Palace. Only esoteric disciples are qualified to enter. The Phaseless Divine Palace's disciples were ranked from low to high as ordinary disciples, elite disciples, true disciples, core disciples, and esoteric disciples. It was said that there was another rank above esoteric disciples, which was also the highest rank in the Phaseless Divine Palace. Compared to the Phaseless Sky Pagoda, esoteric disciples would need to reach the 21st floor at the very least. Only esoteric disciples were qualified to enter the sacred ground for arrays. It was undoubtedly extremely important and had a great attraction. Chumu, I'm the Phaseless Divine Palace's Sword Phase Hall's elder Jian Xuanzi. Jian, Xuanzi said. He stared at Chumu as if he had discovered something. His eyes lit up as he continued. Can you imagine the scene of thousands of swords with a wave of your hand? Using the sword array to evolve heaven and earth. Using the sword array to shatter everything. And using the sword array to recreate the void? Jian Xuanzi's tone was direct and sharp. The content of his words gave people unlimited imagination. Chumu's eyes also lit up. Chumu, as long as you join my Phaseless Palace, I will definitely get you a spot in the 4-phase mountain. In addition, the resources you can enjoy will also increase by 10%. Phaseless Palaces, Wu Hongzi said again. My Sky Phase Hall will increase by 20%. Sky Phase Hall's elder Tianmuzi roared as he glared at Phaseless Palace's elder. Phaseless Divine Palace was divided into 6 palaces. They were Phaseless Palace, Sky Phase Palace, Earth Phase Palace, Human Phase Palace, Dragon Phase Palace, and Sword Phase Palace. Among them, Phaseless Palace was the leader. It was the main branch of Phaseless Divine Palace, the most core part. Naturally, it would have more resources. The 6 palaces either had different philosophies or different directions. This caused the disciples of the 6 palaces to have obvious differences in array Tao. Especially the more profound the array Tao, the more obvious the difference. Seeing with their own eyes and hearing with their own ears that the elders of the 6 palaces of Phaseless Divine Palace made promises and even quarreled with each other in order to take Chumu into their respective palaces as a disciple, the surrounding people were dumbfounded. Their hearts were filled with envy. These 6 people were the elders of the 6 palaces of Phaseless Divine Palace. They were all powerful figures in their respective palaces. They didn't believe that their status was high, their cultivation was profound, and their array Dao attainments were incomparably shocking. Any one of them could cause the phaseless world to shake with a stomp of their feet. The several sovereign realm experts of the giant elephant family looked as if their parents had died. Zhou Cheng and Li Shuqiu were similarly shocked. There were very few people who could make the elders of the 6 palaces fight over them. It even looked as if they were about to fight. It was simply envious. Previously, Zhou Cheng was still in a bad mood. He was still thinking if Chu Mu would enter Phaseless Divine Palace. Should he go and find trouble with him? But now he didn't dare to do so. In fact, when Chu Mu reached the 18th floor, his thoughts of finding trouble with him had already dissipated, because Chu Mu had surpassed his level. If he found trouble with Chu Mu, he would only be looking for trouble. Now that he saw this scene, his heart trembled. The elders of the 6 palaces continued to quarrel. Seniors. Chu Mu revealed a bitter smile. He also didn't know that he would cause such a big mess. The moment he spoke, the elders of the 6 palaces immediately stopped quarreling. Their eyes seemed to be shining like large light bulbs. They were simply becoming searchlights. I am honored that the elders think so highly of me. Chu Mu is endlessly grateful. But in fact, I'm a sword cultivator. If I want to learn array Dao, Sword Phase Hall should be the most suitable place for me. When these words came out, only the elder of Sword Phase Hall was beaming with joy. The other elders of the 5 palaces had a helpless expression. No, Chu Mu. My Phaseless Palace also has a profound sword array inheritance. As long as you come to Phaseless Palace, the sword array inheritance will definitely be given to you. Wu Hongzi made a final effort. Wu Hongzi, do you want to test my sword array? Jian Xuanzi was furious. His shocking sharpness directly locked onto Wu Hongzi. He had the aura of, if you dare to speak again, I'll use my sword to teach you a lesson. Thank you, Senior, for thinking so highly of me. But since I've chosen Sword Phase Hall, it's not good to go back on my words. Chu Mu smiled helplessly. Chapter 2366. Chu Mu left Phaseless Giant City with Shui Yinling and followed Elder Jian Xuanzi of Phaseless Palaces, Sword Phase Hall to Phaseless Palace. He left his name on the black stone tablet outside Phaseless Sky Tower. For a long time after that, Chu Mu's legend was spread in and out of Phaseless Giant City. Stories that Chu Mu and I had to tell. Days when Chu Mu and I cultivated together. And so on and so forth. All kinds of fabricated stories were spread. Chu Mu didn't care about any of this, nor would he care about it. His goal was only to learn profound formation Dao and apply it to his sword Dao, so that he could better control all heavenly swords and display even more power. That was all. Chu Mu and Shui Yinling were both minor sovereign realm cultivators. Even though they were suppressed by phaseless worlds, heavenly Dao, and could only unleash minor sovereign realm cultivation, their flying speed wasn't slow. They weren't inferior to ordinary minor sovereign realm cultivators. Of course, they couldn't be compared to Jian Xuanzi because Jian Xuanzi was a great sovereign realm expert. The Phaseless Divine Palace was located on the Phaseless Mountain. It was the largest and tallest mountain in the phaseless Great World, with a height of 9,999 zhang. It towered above the ground, and looking up, one could only see countless clouds lingering around it. It was impossible to see the peak, and the phaseless great city was located at the foot of the Phaseless Mountain. Next, you have to pay attention to my figure. Don't make any mistakes. When they were halfway up the mountain, Jian Xuanzi's voice entered Chu Mu and Shui Yinling's ears. As Chu Mu's Dao companion, he could bring Shui Yinling into Sword Phase Hall. Phaseless Palace was located at the top of Phaseless Mountain. From halfway up the mountain, countless arrays were set up. These arrays were mainly used to confuse and defend. However, if they were all activated, they also had a terrifying counterattack ability. Even great sovereign realm experts wouldn't be able to take advantage of them, let alone minor sovereign realm experts. Chu Mu and Xue Yinling both stared at Jian Xuanzi's figure and watched as he quickly moved. They remembered all sorts of subtle movements and quickly grasped them. Xue Yinling had never learned arrays, so she couldn't see it clearly. Chu Mu, on the other hand, had some attainments in arrays. He could see that there were mysterious arrays around them. When they passed through the arrays changed again. That was to say, the way they passed through the arrays couldn't be repeated. The array formation here would change every once in a while. To pass through it, one had to follow a different path. After flying up for a long time, there were no traces of the formation. Chu Mu and Xue Yinling followed Jian Xuanzi and entered the true formless divine palace. The phaseless mountain, which was 9,999 feet tall, was different from what they had imagined. It was as if there were countless forked mountain peaks, with one mountain peak as the main mountain. 5 huge mountain peaks stood around it. In addition, there were countless small mountain peaks around each main mountain peak. At a glance, one could see that there were countless palaces on the mountain peak. It seemed to be in a mess, but it didn't feel chaotic. Instead, there was a strange feeling, as if it contained a very unique charm and profoundness. The 6 great halls of Phaseless Palace are located in different directions and are very far away. The 6 great halls form a great array called 6 Phases Creation and Destruction Myriad Will Primordial Array. Jian Xuanzi said the name of an extremely grand formation, giving off a very powerful feeling. This great formation is the supreme formation of the formless divine palace. It was set up by the ancestor who created the formless divine palace back then. Under full activation, even a semi-god sovereign would not be able to gain any benefits. Chu Mu and Xue Yinling were shocked. To be able to resist a demigod sovereign's array, what kind of array was that? How terrifying was that? Sword Phase Hall is located in the northeast corner of Phaseless Mountain. Jian Xuanzi said, and brought Chu Mu and Xue Yinling to the main peak in the northeast corner of Phaseless Mountain. The mountain peak where Sword Phase Hall was located was called Sword Phase Peak. It was like a huge sword that soared into the sky, as if it was going to pierce through the heavens. When they approached, Chu Mu seemed to hear the sound of a sword ringing in his ears. He felt an indescribable profoundness and sharpness. Chu Mu could see that in the surroundings of the sword aspect peak, there were countless formation marks and ripples. Each one gave Chu Mu a feeling of sharpness like a sword. This was the specialty of the sword aspect palace. Its formations were all related to swords. This was also the reason why Chu Mu chose Sword Phase Hall. Otherwise, he might have chosen Phaseless Hall. After all, it was the most orthodox inheritance of Phaseless Palace. Jian Xuanzi was an elder of Sword Phase Hall. After he opened the array around Sword Phase Peak, Chu Mu and Xue Yinling were surprised to find that countless sword light appeared in the void. As they moved, they condensed into a great path of sword light, which led directly to Sword Phase Peak. On both sides of the sword light, there were fluctuations of arrays. "Let's go," Jian Xuanzi said, and took the lead to walk into the great path of sword light. Chu Mu and Xue Yinling both felt that it was quite novel. They followed him and felt the same as walking on the path. For Chu Mu and Xue Yinling, Array Dao was undoubtedly a relatively unfamiliar domain, which aroused their desire to explore. After entering Sword Phase Peak, under Jian Xuanzi's arrangement, Chu Mu became a core disciple of Sword Phase Hall. He enjoyed the treatment of a core disciple and had an independent cave residence. As his cultivation partner, Xue Yinling could also live in the cave residence. There were a total of 332 core disciples in Sword Phase Hall. Including Chu Mu, there were 333 core disciples. Chu Mu, who had become a core disciple, received the robe of a core disciple. He didn't need to wear it usually. He only needed to wear it on some formal occasions, such as Sword Phase Hall Assembly or Phaseless Palace Assembly. The second was a token. The token of Sword Phase Hall was called Sword Phase Array Token. It was the status symbol of a disciple of Sword Phase Hall. It was also the pass to enter and exit the array outside the peak. The third was a disk array. The disk array was a tool to set up an array. Array Dao cultivators often needed time to set up an array. However, in the process of battle, the enemy wouldn't give you time to set up an array properly. Therefore, the disk array became necessary, inscribing the array on the disk array in advance. When needed, one could directly activate the disk array's power to quickly form an array. With an array to trap or defend against the enemy, it was equivalent to buying time for oneself to set up other arrays. It could be said that the disk array was an essential item for array Dao cultivators. Without a disk array, it was better to stay at home obediently and not go out. This disk array was a blank disk array. One needed to inscribe the array on it. This was an earth-level disk array. From low to high, the disk array could be divided into yellow level, black level, earth level, and heaven level. Above the heaven level, there seemed to be an even higher level disk array. Ordinary disciples of Phaseless Palace didn't have a disk array, or rather, if they wanted one, they had to purchase it themselves. After becoming an elite disciple, they would receive a blank yellow level disk array. After becoming a direct disciple, they would receive a blank black level disk array. And after becoming a core disciple, they would receive a blank earth level disk array. The 6 halls of the Formless God Palace all had different array disks. For example, the Formless Hall's array disks were circular, while the Sword Phase Hall's array disks had sharp edges like sword edges. The Sword Phase Hall's Earth Grade Array disks had a total of 18 sword edges. The value of the disk array wasn't low. The higher the level of the disk array, the more valuable it was, especially the disk array produced by Phaseless Palace. It was the best among the disk array of the same level. However, the disk array of the Phaseless Palace was usually only distributed internally and wouldn't spread to the outside world. The Phaseless World's arrays were divided into high and low levels. Just like the disk array, they were divided into ordinary, yellow, black, earth, and heaven levels. Ordinary arrays were the array levels that Phaseless Palace's ordinary disciples learned and cultivated. They corresponded to the 9th to 11th floors of the Phaseless Sky Pagoda. Yellow level array laws were the array levels that Phaseless Palace's elite disciples learned and cultivated. They corresponded to the 12th to 14th floors of the Phaseless Sky Pagoda. Black level arrays were the array levels that Phaseless Palace's direct disciples learned and cultivated. They corresponded to the 15th to 17th floors of the Phaseless Sky Pagoda. Earth level arrays were the array levels that Phaseless Palace's core disciples learned and cultivated. They corresponded to the 18th to 20th floors of the Phaseless Sky Pagoda. Heaven level arrays were the array levels that Phaseless Palace's secret disciples learned and cultivated. They corresponded to the 21st to 23rd floors of the Phaseless Sky Pagoda. The Phaseless Palace was the ruler of the phaseless world. Naturally, the arrays and disk array levels they set would be the same as the Phaseless World's arrays and disk array levels. In addition to the arrays and disk array levels, array Dao cultivators were also divided into different levels. The lowest level was naturally Array Apprentice. That was the basic level. If it corresponded to the Phaseless Sky Pagoda, it would belong to the 1st to 8th floors. Above the Array Apprentice was the Elementary Array Master, which was the level of Phaseless Palace's ordinary disciples. After that was the Intermediate Array Master, which was the level of Phaseless Palace's elite disciples. Above that was the Advanced Array Master, which was the level of Phaseless Palace's direct disciples. Above that was the Elementary Array Master, which was the level of Phaseless Palace's core disciples. Phaseless Palace's secret disciples corresponded to the Grand Array Master. Above the Array Master was the so-called Array Grandmaster. Every Array Grandmaster enjoyed a lofty status in the phaseless world. Of course, the majority of Array Grand Masters belonged to the Phaseless Palace. In addition to the core disciple robes, array tokens, and disc array, there were also a few books. One was the history of the Phaseless Palace, one was the laws of the Phaseless Palace, and one was the Sword Affinity Hall's array, Tao, cultivation method, the Sword Affinity Scripture. In addition to these, Chu Mu also obtained the detailed information of the Sword Affinity Hall's array formations from the ordinary level to the Earth level. Of course, there was only one Earth level array formation. If he wanted more, he would have to rely on his own ability to obtain them. The Sword Affinity Scripture was a compulsory array Tao cultivation method for every Sword Affinity Hall's disciple. There was no conflict with other cultivation methods. Every 3 levels corresponded to a disciple's level. Chu Mu was a core disciple and had obtained a total of 12 levels of the Sword Affinity Scripture. He also had to cultivate it because only by cultivating the Sword Affinity Scripture could he better learn and cultivate the various arrays of the Sword Affinity Hall. Chu Mu began to read and comprehend in his immortal cave. Chapter 2367. To Chu Mu, the difficulty of the Sword Scripture wasn't high. He quickly comprehended it. One had to know that the Phaseless Palace's disciples, from the ordinary disciples to the core disciples, had the highest cultivation at the peak of the 3rd step, Great Emperor Realm. Above the core disciples, the majority of the esoteric disciples were at the 3rd step, Great Emperor Realm. Only a few of them were able to surpass the Great Emperor Realm and reach the Minor Sovereign Realm. Cultivation wasn't the symbol of the Phaseless Palace's disciple status. However, the level of cultivation was related to the level of array Tao attainments. Although it wasn't absolute, it was suitable for the majority of people. The higher the cultivation, the higher the realm, and the deeper the understanding of the heavenly Tao. The array Tao, to a certain extent, could be considered as a branch of the heavenly Tao. It was an alternative interpretation of the heavenly Tao. In the end, no matter what Tao one cultivated, it would ultimately lead to the heavenly Tao, the great Tao of the primal chaos universe's origin. There was more or less a connection between them. On the other hand, one's array Tao attainments also required the support of cultivation. Otherwise, one would only be a theoretical grandmaster, other than those who entered the Phaseless Divine Palace by challenging the Phaseless Sky Pagoda. The other disciples who were recruited through the Phaseless Divine Palace's Mountain Gate would usually start cultivating from a low cultivation and gradually increase their cultivation. Chu Mu belonged to the former. As a core disciple, he had a cultivation that far surpassed the ordinary core disciples. This was also one of his advantages. Chu Mu didn't spend much time to comprehend the 12 layers of the Sword Scripture. He even comprehended the essence of the Scripture and simulated it. Under the simulation, there wasn't any difficulty in cultivating it. This also allowed Chu Mu to know the effects of cultivating the Sword Scripture. The Sword Sutra was the inherited cultivation method of the Sword Sutra, and it was also the main cultivation method of the Sword Sutra. Cultivating the Sword Sutra would form a unique Yuan Qi. It wouldn't have a powerful attack power, nor would it have any defensive power or self-healing ability. It could be said that the cultivators of the Sword Sutra had very weak combat power and would often become the target of others who were stronger than them. However, there were 2 benefits to cultivating the Sword Scripture. The first was that the Sword Scripture would provide an obvious boost to one's cultivation of the Tao of formations. The second was that when one used the Sword Scripture's origin energy to set up a formation, the might of the formation would be greatly improved. The Sword Aspect Sutra was the legacy cultivation method of the Sword Aspect Hall. Naturally, it would amplify the array of the Sword Aspect Hall. It could be said that cultivators of the Sword Scripture were like kittens when they did not use formations. However, when they used formations, they were fierce tigers. After the simulation, Chu Mu began to cultivate the Sword Scripture. The Sword Scripture was a unique cultivation technique. It wouldn't clash with the cultivation technique he was cultivating. Instead, it could exist at the same time, and the essence force he cultivated wouldn't clash with each other. In theory, the 12th level of the sword physique scripture was equivalent to the limit of a third step great emperor. In other words, even if one cultivated the 12th level of the sword physique scripture, the highest cultivation level would be the limit of a third step great emperor. In order to reach the sovereign realm, one would need a more profound sword physique scripture. Not long after, Chu Mu had cultivated the sword scripture to the limit of the 12th layer. He opened his palm, and an almost transparent ball of origin power circulated in his palm. It emitted a kind of sharpness, but it did not have much direct attack power. Instead, it had a strange fluctuation. I can start learning the array Tao. Chu Mu thought to himself. In theory, his array Tao attainment had reached the level of a core disciple. After all, he had reached the 18th floor of the phaseless sky shrouding pagoda, and almost reached the 19th floor. However, that was referring to his ability to decipher the array Tao and not the ability to set up the array Tao. Chu Mu had to start learning from the beginning. He had a deep foundation, a profound realm, and also a superb comprehension ability. In short, Chu Mu possessed all the abilities to quickly learn and grasp the array Tao. Therefore, he learned very quickly. However, in order to better understand and grasp the array Tao, Chu Mu deliberately slowed down to strengthen his foundation. Time flew. In the blink of an eye, a few months had passed. The disciples of Formless Divine Palace seemed to be very low-key. Chu Mu had been staying in the cave residence to learn formations for a few months, while Shui Yinling was cultivating. The others did not come to visit. They were all like technical nerds. This was good for Chu Mu. His purpose in coming here was to perfect the profound formations and transform them into his own formations. He would combine them with the all-heaven swords. When the time was right, he would leave this place and explore the chaotic universe again. In a few months, Chu Mu had learned all the array Tao he had obtained. However, he did not set up the array Tao because setting up an array required the corresponding materials to set it up faster and better. The most commonly used materials were naturally array flags. The array disc was indeed a very good thing. However, the problem was that every time the array disc was used, it consumed a lot of energy. This consumption was fine once or twice, but it would be unbearable if it was used too many times. In addition, the array disc was often used up. Every time it was used, it would be used up until the array disc finally collapsed. Therefore, the array disc was often used at a critical moment. Array flags were also necessary and could be considered as a commonly used item. The speed of setting up an array was slower than the array disc, but it could be used for a long time and the energy consumption would not be as high. Of course, setting up an array out of thin air was also a method. It required at least a grandmaster of array Tao to be able to do it. Moreover, the power of an array set up out of thin air was often inferior to the power of an array set up with array flags. The array flags of the Sword Phase Palace were very special. They were called array swords. As the name implied, they were the swords used to set up the array. Therefore, to set up the array of the Sword Phase Palace, one must first have an array sword. Chu Mu did not have one, but it would not be difficult for him. Array sword, I can use the all-heaven swords as array swords, Chu Mu thought. However, he was thinking about the feasibility of it. Array swords were different from ordinary swords. They were more special, and their most direct use was to set up arrays. If I were to integrate the sword phase scripture into the truth-seeking technique, allowing the truth-seeking technique to have the ability of the sword phase scripture, I might be able to use the all-heaven swords as array swords. Chu Mu thought as his eyes lit up. Chu Mu did not have much confidence if he could do it. However, he could try and simulate it first. Shui Yinling did not disturb Chu Mu. She could tell that Chu Mu was facing a difficult problem and was trying to solve it. She believed that Chu Mu would definitely be able to solve the problem. The only difference was the amount of time. Under the simulation, Chu Mu faced another difficult problem. The source of the problem was that his accumulation in array Tao was still not enough. Or rather, his understanding of array Tao was still too little. However, this could also be solved. He was a core disciple of the Sword Phase Hall. He could read up on array Dao information for disciples below the level of core disciple. This was one of the benefits of being a core disciple of the Sword Phase Hall. To put it simply, the Phaseless Palace was the sect with the least rules among all the sects that Chu-Mu knew. Chu-Mu plunged into countless array Dao information. They were all theories, records passed down, experiences of predecessors, and so on. Regardless of whether it was right or wrong, Chu-Mu would check it out. Once he checked it out, he would remember it deeply in his mind. A few months later, Chu-Mu flipped through all the books in the Sword Phase Hall and memorized all the contents. After returning to his cave residence, Chu-Mu went into seclusion to organize the harvest of the past few months. A large amount of formation path books had caused Chu-Mu's understanding of formations to undergo an earth-shattering change in a short few months. This was because the accumulation of knowledge had led to a qualitative change through quantitative change. As his mind worked at full speed, Chu-Mu integrated all kinds of knowledge. After that, he integrated the essence of the Sword Phase scripture into the truth-seeking technique. Then, he used his own Yuan power to integrate into the All-Heaven Swords, allowing the All-Heaven Swords to possess the characteristics of array swords. There were two ways to obtain array swords. The first was to exchange for them at the Sword Phase Hall with corresponding merits. The second was to refine them. Chu-Mu did not need to exchange, nor did he need to refine them, because his original goal was not to become an array Dao cultivator. His goal was only to use array Dao for himself, to surpass the limits of the All-Heaven Swords' power. Naturally, he had to start with the All-Heaven Swords. Some changes had to be made to the All-Heaven Swords, without affecting the original foundation. The array Dao that the Sword Phase Hall learned had to be changed accordingly, to become more suitable for himself. After deducing, Chu-Mu knew that this was a difficult process. It was not as easy as he imagined, but since he had already stepped on this path, he had to continue walking down it. Set up the array. With a low shout, the All-Heaven Swords instantly condensed out of thin air. There were a total of 5 swords, respectively metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. The 5 All-Heaven Swords flew out, and then landed in 5 different directions, stabbing into the ground. Their power was activated, and a formation rapidly formed. 5 elements, Sword Chi formation. This was an ordinary formation in the Sword Phase Hall. It was one of the few formations that ordinary disciples could cultivate, and it was a relatively basic formation. With Chu-Mu's attainments in array Dao, it was easy for him to set up an ordinary formation. After setting up the formation, Chu-Mu activated the power of the formation. Instantly, gold, green, blue, red, and brown sword chi shot out from the 5 All-Heaven Swords. They rapidly swam, and their auras were as sharp as 5 swords, shuttling back and forth within the formation. If someone was in the formation, they would be attacked by the 5 different colored sword chi. Following that, Chu-Mu withdrew the 5 elements sword chi formation and set up another formation. Water and fire sword chi roaming dragon formation. Triple origin sword chi formation. For divisions, separate origin sword chi formation. Ordinary formations were set up by Chu-Mu without any difficulty. Furthermore, their power was unleashed to the extreme. These ordinary formations could only be considered as relatively basic formations. Following that, Chu-Mu began to set up more profound formations, which were formations that the elite disciples of the Phaseless Palace could learn and grasp. Dual origin, flood dragon, sword chi formation. Triple origin, sword chi formation. For divisions, birth, and destruction, sword chi formation. Great 5 elements, sword chi formation. The yellow grade formations that the elite disciples cultivated were obviously superior to ordinary formations in terms of power and profoundness. But to Chu-Mu, it was still not difficult. It was very easy for him to set it up and unleash its power to the extreme. Chapter 2368. In the blink of an eye, Chu Mu had stayed in the sword phase hall of the Phaseless Palace for 10 years. 10 years was nothing to a great emperor realm cultivator. Perhaps it would pass in a single seclusion. To a sovereign realm expert, it was even more insignificant. After Elder Jian Xuanzi brought Chu Mu back to the sword phase hall, he never appeared again because he went into seclusion. A core disciple was naturally very important to the sword phase hall, but didn't require constant attention. It could be said that the majority of the disciples of the Phaseless Palace weren't those who fought fiercely. They preferred to study array Dao. Even if it was a competition, they would use array Dao to compete. Although 10 years was very short, to Chu Mu, it was a huge transformation. Originally, he only knew how to set up some simple arrays. It had nothing to do with profound. Even if he reached the 18th floor of the Phaseless Sky Pagoda and his array Dao attainments increased by a lot, it was still mainly to increase his ability to decipher arrays. Decipher arrays was only the simplest part of array Dao attainments. In the 10 years in the Sword Phase Hall, other than cultivating the truth-seeking technique normally, Chu Mu also maintained the rhythm of a few rounds of basic sword techniques every day. The rest of the time was spent on array Dao. He could not eat, drink, or sleep. His powerful cultivation and high realm were enough to support him to study nonstop at all times. In 10 years, Chu Mu had learned all the formations he could learn in the Sword Phase Palace. Moreover, he had a very deep understanding of them. Of course, he could continue to learn, but because his disciple rank wasn't high enough, he was limited. It's time to raise my disciple rank, Chu Mu thought to himself. After 10 years of seclusion, he finally walked out of the cave. In the Phaseless Palace, there was more than one way to raise a disciple's rank. For example, challenging the Phaseless Sky Pagoda was one of them. Of course, challenging the Phaseless Sky Pagoda was the simplest way, but there was no guarantee that the disciple's rank would be raised after passing it. After all, the Phaseless Sky Pagoda's test was only to decipher arrays. Chu Mu directly submitted an application to the Sword Phase Hall for the Esoteric Disciple Assessment. Chu Mu's application, not long after, caused a commotion and directly alarmed the elders of the Sword Phase Hall. Coincidentally, Jian Xuanzi came out of seclusion, and after hearing the news, he was even more surprised. This core disciple called Chu Mu reached the 18th floor of the non-phase covering Sky Pagoda 10 years ago. Jian Xuanzi said, "In other words, he has only been a core disciple of our Sword Phase Hall for 10 years. 10 years to apply for the Esoteric Disciple Test? Isn't that too fast?" All the elders were astonished because this had never happened before in the history of the Phaseless Palace. Even the first place on the first black stone tablet of the Phaseless Sky Shrouding Tower, the peerless genius of the array Dao who was able to reach the 24th floor of the Phaseless Sky Shrouding Tower, was unable to increase his array Dao cultivation by an entire level in such a short period of time. Yes, from a core disciple to an esoteric disciple, that was not only an increase in the disciple's rank, it was also an increase in the array Dao level. It was equivalent to advancing from the earth level to the heaven level. Every elder was clear of the difficulty because they had all come from that time, and each of them had used at least 100 years to advance from the earth level to the heaven level. Now, a cultivator who came from the outside world and joined the Sword Phase Hall midway, and had only studied in the Sword Phase Hall for 10 years, and he wanted to apply for the Esoteric Disciple Assessment. Wasn't this kind of leap too frightening? It's only been 10 years, and you're already applying for the assessment. You don't pass, an elder said angrily. He felt that this kind of attitude wasn't good, and he didn't have the spirit to study the array Dao at all. Don't pass. It's only been 10 years, it's too hasty. Wait, I think he should pass. Jian Xuanzi raised a different opinion. Chu Mu was specially recruited by me 10 years ago. His cultivation is at the Young Dominator realm. I think highly of him. Jian Xuanzi's position in the Sword Phase Hall was very high. Among the elders, his words had a lot of weight. Therefore, when he spoke and made a decision, the other elders didn't object. However, not objecting was one thing, and not agreeing in their hearts was another. Soon, Chumu received a notice that the esoteric disciple assessment would be held 3 days later. 3 days were left for Chumu to prepare. In fact, 3 days was very short. After Chumu adjusted his breathing, he left the cave and headed to the assessment location. Shui Yinling was in seclusion, sorting out her void sword Dao. In 10 years, they had gradually adapted to the formless world's heavenly Dao, and the suppression they received had weakened a lot. Now, their cultivation had recovered to the young dominator realm, Deshang's level. The assessment location was at a corner of the sword phase peak. Chumu, are you confident? Jian Xuanzi asked with a smile. I'm somewhat confident. Chumu said, neither servile nor overbearing. However, in the eyes of the other elders, it was clearly not practical enough. In front of us is the esoteric disciple assessment location. It's called the Myriad Formation, Heavenly Road. Jian Xuanzi pointed to the front. It seemed to be shrouded in endless clouds and was extremely mysterious. After passing the 4th section of the Myriad Formation, Heavenly Road, and entering the 5th section, you will be considered to have passed the esoteric disciple assessment and become an esoteric disciple. I understand. Chumu nodded and strode towards the Myriad Formation, Heavenly Road. Soon he walked into the fog and disappeared. Jian Xuanzi, do you really think he can reach the 5th section of the Myriad Formation, Heavenly Road? An elder said. I don't know. Jian Xuanzi laughed, but I hope he can. We also hope that he can. However, 10 years is still too short. He should calm down and study for at least 50 years before coming back. Another elder also said. The other elders nodded their heads. Towards Chumu, they didn't dislike him, nor did they have any prejudice against him. However, they felt that he had only been in the Sword Phase Palace for 10 years. Yet he wanted to apply for the secret disciple exam. This was too careless, and they happened to dislike this attitude. To a formation Dao cultivator, carelessness was a fatal flaw. I only hope that he can clearly recognize his own abilities. In the future, he will calm down and study the array Dao. He might have extraordinary achievements in the future. An elder sighed. The other elders also thought so. He was not afraid of setbacks, but he was afraid that he would not be able to recover after a setback. He only hoped that this person would not. Chumu did not know what the elders were discussing. When he walked into the clouds, it was equivalent to walking into the Myriad Formation, Heavenly Road, and beginning his journey. The Myriad Formation, Heavenly Road, can't really have 10,000 formations, right? Chumu secretly guessed. His guess was not wrong. In the Myriad Formation, Heavenly Road, there were indeed 10,000 formations, and each formation was different. Chumu stepped into the first formation. It was a complete formation that was currently in operation. Chumu instantly recognized that it was an ordinary formation, and also a trapping formation among the various formations. As the name implied, it was only used to trap the target and did not possess any killing power. To Chumu, breaking an ordinary formation was not difficult at all. In an instant, he succeeded and stepped into the second formation. The second formation was still a cracking formation. He continued to crack it and continued to move forward. The difficulty of the formations in front was not high. They were only ordinary formations. To Chumu, it was not difficult at all. The Myriad Formation, Heavenly Road, was not only used for the assessment of esoteric disciples. The assessment of core disciples, true disciples, and even elite disciples could all be carried out in the Myriad Formation, Heavenly Road. However, to become an esoteric disciple, one had to completely pass through the Myriad Formation, Heavenly Road. In other words, as long as one could pass through the Myriad Formation, Heavenly Road, they could become an esoteric disciple. Chumu continued to charge through the formations. One by one, he passed through the formations on the Myriad Formation, Heavenly Road. This kind of charge had a different meaning from the phaseless, shrouding sky tower. The phaseless, shrouding sky tower required one to constantly crack the formations. The myriad formation, heavenly road, required one to break through the formations. One also had to follow the requirements of setting up the formations, perfecting the formations, and so on. The difficulty of perfecting the formations was higher than setting up the formations. After all, the formations were incomplete and needed to be perfected. If one was setting up the formations themselves, then it would be fine. But if it was someone else setting up the formations, then the setting up techniques and so on would be different. This required in-depth research before it could be perfected. The myriad formation, heavenly road, had a total of 10,000 formations. Each formation was continuously distributed forward. It could be divided into 5 sections. The first section had 4,000 formations, which corresponded to the level of ordinary disciples. The second section had 3,000 formations, which corresponded to the level of elite disciples. The third section had 2,000 formations, which corresponded to the level of true disciples. The fourth section had 800 formations, which corresponded to the level of core disciples. The fifth section had 200 formations, which corresponded to the level of esoteric disciples. The myriad formation, heavenly road, was countless times more valuable than the phaseless, shrouding sky tower. Every disciple who broke through the myriad formation, heavenly road, could be regarded as an elite disciple of the same level. They could even be considered as the top ones. Chu Mu easily passed through the first section and entered the second section. The time he spent was very short. That's fast. It's indeed fast. The elders outside could feel the situation inside the myriad formation, heavenly road. Each and every one of them was very surprised because Chu Mu's speed of passing through the first section was really too fast. After searching through their memories, they found that this speed could definitely be ranked in the top 3. With such a fast speed, perhaps he can reach the 5th section. I hope so. There were more than 300 core disciples in the Sword Phase Hall, but only 40 esoteric disciples. It was very few. One more esoteric disciple was a good thing, especially those esoteric disciples with amazing potential. It was even better. The second section belonged to the level of elite disciples. There were 3,000 formations in total. For Chu Mu, it was not the slightest bit difficult. The time he took to pass through it was no less than the first section. Soon he entered the third section, which caused the elders to exclaim again. The third section of the myriad formation, heavenly road, corresponded to the level of true disciples. The difficulty of the formations had already increased significantly. There were more than 2,000 formations. An ordinary core disciple would need to spend a lot of time to pass through, but Chu Mu was still fast. Chapter 2369. Chunzong's speed of passing through the first 3 sections of the myriad formation through Heaven Road was shocking. Soon, he entered the 4th section. The 4th section belonged to the core disciple level, which was also Chu Mu's current level. The difficulty of passing through it suddenly increased by a lot, and his speed instantly decreased. However, he was still faster than the others. Seems like he might be able to reach the 5th section. An elder muttered, "This disciple is truly talented. Could he really be a genius that only appears once every 10,000 years?" The elders were secretly surprised as they discussed. Elder Jian Xuanzi was beaming with joy. Chu Mu was only accepted into the Sword Phase Hall after Jian Xuanzi competed with the other 5 halls. If Chu Mu failed the esoteric disciple assessment, Jian Xuanzi wouldn't suffer any substantial loss, but he would definitely lose face. If he could reach the 5th section of the myriad formation through Heaven Road and become an esoteric disciple, Jian Xuanzi would also gain face. Compared to the others, Jian Xuanzi was the one who hoped that Chu Mu could pass the assessment in one try. Now that he saw Chu Mu's speed of passing through the myriad formation through Heaven Road, he was naturally the happiest. In the 4th section, Chu Mu was in a killing array. Sword light was everywhere, and it was incomparably sharp. It was as though there were hundreds of swords clashing, wantonly releasing sharpness and bombarding Chumu, who was in the array. Array Dao was classified into killing array, trapping array, defensive array, illusion array, and special array. Among them, trapping array was the simplest. Killing array and defensive array were the most commonly used. Illusion array was more difficult, and special array was the rarest. The fourth section's killing array was an earth rank array Dao. Its power was extremely shocking. Every sword chi could easily kill a great emperor expert. Under hundreds of sword chi, even a peak third step great emperor expert would be killed. Chu Mu was a minor sovereign expert, and his cultivation had also recovered to minor sovereign realm. Deshang wouldn't be at a disadvantage even if he fought with an ordinary perfect circle minor sovereign expert. However, one couldn't use brute force to pass through the myriad formation through Heaven Road. Chu Mu could only use array Dao cultivation to break through the array. Otherwise, it would be judged as a failure. To a formation cultivator, using brute force to break a formation was a humiliation. Chu Mu rapidly evaded the 100 strands of sword light. He used the all heavens swords to set up a defensive formation around him, which was the so-called defensive formation. The defensive formation was used to block the attacks of the sword light while evading. It was also used to find a flaw in the killing formation before breaking it. With Chu Mu's astounding observation skills and profound mastery of formations, he was able to find the flaws of the killing formation. Without moving, he directly controlled the swords to fly out and strike the flaws of the killing formation, breaking it. Nothing was absolutely perfect, and there would definitely be flaws. The only difference was the size of the flaws and whether or not they could be discovered. Perhaps this killing formation might seem perfect to some people, but that was only relative. At the very least, Chu Mu could find the flaws in it. For example, if you look at a very smooth ball, you can't see the small holes on it with your eyes, but you can see them with a magnifying glass. If you can't see a smooth ball with a normal magnifying glass, you can use a high-power magnifying glass. Chu Mu entered the next formation. This was an incomplete formation. Chu Mu needed to perfect this formation before he could continue. Perfecting a formation was not easy, and it was an earth-grade formation, so the difficulty was even greater. If it was 10 years ago, he would definitely be helpless, but 10 years later, he did not know what level his attainments in the array Dao had reached, because his progress was simply too great. Without much time, Chu Mu studied the incomplete formation and continued to perfect it. After completing it, Chu Mu entered the next formation. This was a defensive formation that blocked Chu Mu outside. He needed to break the defensive formation before he could continue. Defensive formations and killing formations were the most common formations. But in terms of difficulty, the defensive formation surpassed the killing formation and was second only to the illusory formation. After breaking through the defensive formation, Chu Mu took a step forward. The surrounding scenery instantly changed, and he found himself in an Azura hell. Countless evil spirits charged at him from all directions. A terrifying killing intent and blood stench assaulted him. If Chu Mu was not a minor sovereign realm expert, he would probably think that the scene in front of him was real and fall into it. At this moment, he immediately reacted. This was an illusory formation. When facing an illusory formation, one must first control one's mind and not be confused. To put it bluntly, an illusory formation was a type of deception. It deceived one's 5 senses, and at a higher level, it deceived one's 6 senses. It made one feel that everything in front of them was real and affected one's subconscious. Under such circumstances, if one felt that they were injured, then they would really be injured. If they were killed and thought that they were dead, then their soul spirit would be destroyed and they would truly die. However, if one knew that they were in an illusory formation, then their 6 senses would not be affected too much. However, one had to break the formation as soon as possible. Otherwise, the longer it took, the more they would be affected. In the end, the fake would become real. After a period of time, Chu Mu found the flaw of the illusory formation. He quickly took action and broke the formation. On the myriad formation path, one formation after another was broken by Chu Mu. He continued to move forward, getting closer and closer to the fifth section. The elders outside the myriad formation path were all nervous. When the last formation of the fourth section was broken by Chu Mu stepped into the fifth section. He finally entered the fifth section. It's still not enough. At the very least, he has to break a fifth section formation to pass the esoteric disciple test. The elders' breathing became hurried. In the sword phase hall, there was more than one person who could break through to the fifth section. However, in just 10 years, there was no one who could break through to the fifth section from a core disciple. Chu Mu was the first. Perhaps he would also be the first. After just 10 years as a core disciple, he would be able to become an esoteric disciple. He would create a brand new record. The anticipation in Jian Xuanzi's heart surpassed that of the other elders. Chu Mu stepped into the first formation of the fifth section. This was a formation that only esoteric disciples could learn. It was a heaven-level formation Dao. Compared to the earth-level formation Dao, it was naturally many times more profound. Fortunately, this was a trapping array. It only trapped Chu Mu and would not attack him, giving him some time to adapt. Only at the fifth section did Chu Mu feel the difficulty. He also mobilized all of his 10 years of learning and immersed himself in studying the trapping array. This time, Chu Mu spent an entire hour before he finally figured it out and began to decipher it. After the trapping array was broken, Chu Mu stepped into the second formation of the fifth section. Outside the myriad formation Heavenly Road, the elders were first shocked and then overjoyed. Elder Jian Xuanzi, your eyesight is too good. A peerless genius, another peerless genius of the array Dao. Great, our sword phase hall actually has such a peerless genius of the array Dao. The elders roared as if they had gone mad. They were incomparably excited. Chu Mu continued to break the formation. The fifth section of the formation was broken one by one. This was a heaven-level formation Dao. Each of them was incomparably profound. The more one broke, the higher one's attainments in the array Dao. If one only broke the first formation of the fifth section, one could be considered to have just reached the level of esoteric disciple. Then, continuing to break the formation meant that one's attainments in the array Dao were stronger among esoteric disciples. How many formations do you all think he can break? An elder asked. I don't know. The other elders shook their heads. Their previous dissatisfaction with Chu Mu had all disappeared. Although they said they didn't know, each of them hoped that Chu Mu could break more formations. The subsequent formations became more and more difficult to decipher. Each formation took Chu Mu more and more time to decipher. After Chu Mu broke the 101st formation, he finally stopped. Because he spent a few hours, he was still unable to break it. He knew that this was his current limit. Although it was a pity that he couldn't pass through the myriad formation, Heavenly Road, Chu Mu also knew that his improvement in these 10 years was incomparably huge. In this way, he could become an esoteric disciple and read more books to learn more profound array Dao. Congratulations, Chu Mu. From now on, you are the esoteric disciple of the Sword Phase Hall. Elder Jian Xuanzi laughed heartily. He was very happy. The other elders also congratulated Chu Mu one after another. Their attitude had undergone a huge change compared to before. After becoming an esoteric disciple, Chu Mu's identity array token had also changed. The cave residence he lived in was also different. It was higher and better. One must know that there were only 40 esoteric disciples in the entire Sword Phase Hall. Their treatment was much better than that of core disciples. At the very least, the value of a heaven-level formation disc far exceeded that of an earth-level formation disc. Chu Mu didn't use the earth-level formation disc previously. Now, he didn't plan to use the heaven-level formation disc for the time being. Instead, He devoted himself to the study and research of array Dao. Chu Mu discovered that it was very difficult to use array Dao to unleash the potential and power of the all heavens soared beyond its limit. This was because it was something completely different from ordinary array Dao. It was something that belonged to him. In other words, he had to learn array Dao to a certain extent and then modify it to make it his own unique array Dao. He spent a period of time trying and found that the difficulty was too great. This was because his accumulation of array Dao was not enough. He lacked sufficient foundation and stability. It's okay. I'm not afraid of not having a way. Chu Mu thought to himself. The array Dao that esoteric disciples could learn was far better than core disciples. Perhaps when he completely grasped the array Dao that esoteric disciples could learn, he would have enough accumulation to try to modify it. Chu Mu, there's another level above esoteric disciples in the phaseless palace. Elder Jian, Xuanzi said to Chu Mu, what level is it? Chu Mu wasn't surprised. He was just a little curious. Your Highness. Elder Jian Xuanzi smiled and said, Your Highness is higher than esoteric disciples. In terms of status, you're not inferior to the elders. This is because they will be the candidates for the future Palace Master. The Palace Master naturally referred to the 6 Palace Masters. As a candidate for the Palace Master, the position of the Palace Master was very high. Your talent in array Dao is outstanding. Perhaps you have the ability to become a Palace Master, Elder Jian Xuanzi said. However, he didn't know that Chu Mu wasn't interested in becoming a Palace Master. Chapter 2370. Phaseless Palace held a competition that was held once in 100 years. All the disciples of the 6 palaces could participate, and the top 10 would receive generous rewards. However, Chu Mu did not participate because he was in seclusion. After becoming an esoteric disciple, Chu Mu devoted himself to learning the array Dao that only esoteric disciples could learn. He had become a Grand Array Dao Master with extraordinary attainments in array Dao. A Grand Array Dao Master was equivalent to a minor Sovereign Realm expert in terms of cultivation level. Formless Divine Palace's disciple competition lasted for a few months before it ended. This had nothing to do with Chu Mu. Chu Mu was in seclusion, and he had integrated the formation Dao that only secret disciples could learn. He had integrated it with the formation Dao he had learned before, creating a complete inheritance. When he came out of seclusion, the competition had ended and an invitation was sent to his cave dwelling. It was an invitation from an esoteric disciple. The content was to congratulate esoteric disciple Yang Jinfei for obtaining 3rd place in the competition. Chu Mu did not want to participate. His purpose in coming to Phaseless Palace was to learn array Dao and to maximize the potential of the All-Heaven Sword. That was all. After that, he would leave and continue to explore the chaotic universe with Xue Yinling. It was unknown whether he would come to Phaseless World again. Chu Mu put the invitation aside. After communicating with Xue Yinling, he went into seclusion again. Senior Brother Yang obtained 3rd place in the competition and won great glory for Sword Phase Hall. This is our glory. How could someone ignore it? An esoteric disciple roared. That's right. I have already sent the invitation to this person's cave dwelling. Now that the invitation is gone, it means that this person has seen the invitation but turned a blind eye to it. He does not care about the glory of Sword Phase Hall. This person is not worthy of being a disciple of Sword Phase Hall. Junior brothers, please don't say that. Perhaps this junior brother is unable to come because of something important. Yang Jinfei said with a smile. Senior Brother Yang, you're kind and benevolent, but rules are rules. They cannot be broken. That's right. Senior Brother Yang, there will be a 2nd time. We cannot tolerate it. Let's go and find this person and ask for an explanation. Junior brother, don't make a big deal out of this. Yang Jinfei said helplessly, but in his heart he was laughing sinisterly. He didn't even come to his banquet. He didn't put him in his eyes at all. even if the other party was regarded by the elders as someone who had the potential to become a prince. On the contrary, Yang Jinfei did not say anything on the surface, but he was extremely jealous in his heart. It must be known that before Chumu appeared, he was the esoteric disciple of the Sword Minister Hall, who was most likely to become the Hall Master. In the eyes of the elders, his position was extraordinary, and among the numerous disciples he was like the chief. Over time, Yang Jinfei developed a supercilious personality, but on the surface he always had a modest appearance and was extremely shrewd. A group of esoteric disciples charged towards Chu Mu's cave abode. They first shouted outside the cave abode, but Chu Mu ignored them as he was in seclusion. "Attack! Break the formation!" An esoteric disciple shouted. Immediately, these esoteric disciples attacked one after another, trying to break the formation outside Chu Mu's cave abode. As soon as the formation was broken, Chu Mu immediately sensed it. He opened his eyes, and a sharp light shot out, as sharp as a sword, piercing through the void. With a thought, Chu Mu appeared at the entrance of the cave abode and saw more than a dozen people outside the cave abode trying to break the formation. "What's the matter?" Chu Mu's voice was indifferent. It was inevitable that he would feel unhappy when his seclusion was interrupted. "You are Chu Mu?" One of them asked coldly. "I am. What's the matter?" Chu Mu asked again. "You received the invitation, right? Why didn't you come to congratulate Senior Brother Yang?" They questioned Chu Mu again. "I'm in seclusion." Chu Mu said, "Do you know that Senior Brother Yang Jinfei obtained 3rd place in the grand competition and won great glory for our Sword Minister Hall? Many senior brothers and junior brothers gave up on their seclusion to congratulate him, but you didn't participate because you were in seclusion. You don't put Senior Brother Yang Jinfei in your eyes, and you don't put the honor of our Sword Minister Hall in your eyes." After a round of reprimanding, it was as if Chu Mu's seclusion was a heinous crime. "Is there anything else?" Chu Mu remained unmoved, and he only asked. If there was nothing else, of course, he would go back into seclusion to avoid wasting time here. Chu Mu's attitude instantly enraged the esoteric disciples. Each of them was furious, and they glared at Chu Mu, as if they wanted to burn Chu Mu to ashes. "You don't deserve to be a disciple of the Sword Minister Hall. Get out of the Sword Minister Hall. Get out of the Formless Palace." Several esoteric disciples suddenly roared. They placed great importance on the honor of Sword Fei's palace and were extremely united. They were extremely dissatisfied with Chu Mu's actions and naturally would be angry. Chu Mu could also see that these people weren't intentionally targeting him. Instead, they felt that his actions weren't right, so they were like this. To put it bluntly, this group of people lacked a single thread in their brains. Other than researching formations, they were rather slow in other aspects. In other words, this group of people had unknowingly been used as cannon fodder. His mind turned, and Chu Mu instantly straightened it out. He knew that behind the scenes, there was a connection to Yang Jinfei. If that was the case, it could only mean that Yang Jinfei was very shrewd. However, what did this have to do with Chu Mu? Instigating some people to create trouble for him was nothing. Chu Mu could ignore it, but if Yang Jinfei dared to directly deal with him, then he had to be prepared to bear his anger. In fact, if possible, Chu Mu did not want to be enemies with the Formless Palace. Firstly, the Formless Palace was very powerful. Secondly, he was learning formations in the Formless Palace and could be considered as a disciple of the Formless Palace. Moreover, Elder Jian Xuanzi treated him well. Under various reasons, Chu Mu was very unwilling to be enemies with the Formless Palace. The matter here was quickly known by the elders, and an elder immediately appeared. "What's going on?" The elder looked at the esoteric disciples with displeasure. A esoteric disciple immediately explained the matter, pointing out that Chu Mu did not put the honor of the Sword Minister Hall in his eyes. "I'm in seclusion." Chu Mu's explanation was very simple. In his opinion, it was indeed a good thing for Yang Jinfei to obtain 3rd place in the grand competition. To a certain extent, it could be considered the honor of the Sword Minister Hall. However, it was up to him whether he participated in the banquet or not. It was very normal for some to participate and some not to participate. Participating did not mean that they did not place the honor of the Sword Minister Hall in their eyes. Not participating did not mean that they did not place the honor of the Sword Minister Hall in their eyes. All right, all of you can go back. After the elder heard it, he roughly understood what was going on. He frowned slightly. He had some opinions about Yang Jinfei in his heart, but he did not show it. Instead, he waved his hand and asked the esoteric disciples to leave first. With the elder's appearance, the matter could only come to an end. The esoteric disciples turned and left one after another. Chu-mu, don't have any psychological burden. The elder smiled and left in a flash. Chu-mu turned and went into seclusion again. He originally thought that this matter would come to an end. However, he did not expect that a few days later, Chu-mu would be summoned. The one who summoned him was the elder pavilion of the Sword Minister Hall. He had no choice but to come out of seclusion. In the elder pavilion, Elder Jian Xuanzi was present. Most of the other elders of the Sword Minister Hall were present as well. Each of them had a solemn expression. However, Chu-mu could see a trace of helplessness between their brows. Apart from the elders, Chu-mu also saw a young man in a black and gold robe. He did not seem to be very old. The aura on his body was at the young dominator realm. He always had a smile on his face that was not a smile. Chu-mu, you're here. Let me introduce you. This is His Highness Yang Jinhong. Elder Jian Xuanzi introduced the young man in the black and gold robe. Chu-mu cupped his hands and bowed. However, Yang Jinhong coldly snorted. The position of a highness was very high. It was comparable to the elders. It was even higher than some elders. Furthermore, they had a certain amount of authority. After all, they could become the palace master in the future. Yang Jinhong was Yang Jinfei's brother. You're Chu-mu. I heard that your talent in array Dao is very outstanding. Yang Jinhong said in a neither fast nor slow manner. His tone was light. Highness, you flatter me. Chu-mu said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. I heard that you have a chance of becoming a highness. Yang Jinhong said again, having talent is a good thing, whether it's for yourself or for our Sword Minister Hall. However, with talent, one must have a sense of honor. A person who lacks a sense of honor, even if he obtains extraordinary achievements in the end, will not be able to spread his name through the ages. Chu-mu quietly listened. From the moment he stepped into the elder pavilion and saw Yang Jinhong and heard Yang Jinhong's name, he had a bad feeling. As a highness, a future palace master candidate, I have the right and obligation to contribute to the development of our Sword Minister Hall. Yang Jinhong first said, then changed the topic. In the past few days, I have repeatedly received responses from disciples, saying that one of the esoteric disciples has ignored the honor of the Sword Minister Hall for his own benefits, and is not worthy to be a disciple of the Sword Minister Hall, and is not worthy to be a disciple of the formless divine palace. However, I feel that we should not listen to one-sided words. I wonder if the esoteric disciple, Chu-mu, has anything to say? Jian Xuanzi immediately transmitted a message to Chu-mu, wanting Chu-mu to say something good and admit defeat. I have nothing to say. Chu-mu stared at Yang Jinhong and said in a neither fast nor slow manner. He knew the truth. Yang Jinhong knew it, and all the elders knew it. To put it bluntly, it was nothing more than Yang Jinhong wanting to deal with him. With Chu-mu's character, it was impossible for him to compromise. Another point was that his accumulation of array Dao in the Sword Minister Hall was more or less complete. Even if he left the Sword Minister Hall and the formless Divine Palace, it wouldn't have much of an impact. Since that is the case from now on, you are no longer a disciple of the Sword Minister Hall. Yang Jinhong directly announced, I, as a highness, announce that you are expelled from the Sword Minister Hall. Highness, you can't. Elder Jian Xuanzi's expression changed greatly and hurriedly said, Chu Mu's Array Dao talent is peerless. After all, he will become an Array Dao Grandmaster in the future, and might even become an Array Dao Grandmaster. Expelling him is our Sword Minister Hall's loss. What we need is someone who is truly useful to the Sword Minister Hall, and not someone who ignores honor for his own benefits. For this matter, the other highnesses also agree. Yang Jinhong made the final decision. Chapter 2371. Two figures flew out from the formless mountain. They were Chu Mu and Shui Yinling. The Sword Phase Hall's Hall Master had great authority. Under the situation where several Hall Masters agreed, it was hard for the elders to object. Of course, if all the elders were to object, then only the Hall Master could make the decision. However, the Hall Master had great potential. Even if he couldn't become the Hall Master in the future, he could at least become an elder with authority. Objecting to the joint decision of several Hall Masters was equivalent to offending them to a certain extent. It was also equivalent to offending the future Hall Master. It wasn't a good thing. Therefore, although the elders of the Elder Pavilion felt that it was a pity, some of them were still unwilling to offend His Highness because of this. Although some of them had the intention, they also knew that if the elders did not work together, it would be impossible to salvage the situation, so it was better not to speak. Another point was that behind every Hall Master, there was actually a portion of elders supporting them. Yang Jinhong naturally had a few elders standing on the same side as him. You still want to compete with me for the position of Hall Master. Now you have no chance at all. Yang Jinfei looked at Chu Mu's departing figure and inwardly sneered. According to what I know, the giant elephant family has been waiting for an opportunity. That person has been expelled from the Sword Phase Hall. Our opportunity has arrived. In the formless giant city, the giant elephant family's peak young dominator experts received the news and were instantly overjoyed. They had been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. Expelled from the Sword Phase Hall. Haha, what kind of heaven-angering thing did that person do to be expelled? The other giant elephant family's peak young dominator experts all laughed. They had waited here for over 20 years. They originally thought that they had waited for nothing, but they didn't expect that it would really happen. Although the giant elephant family couldn't compare to the formless divine palace, it was still possible to bribe a few disciples of the formless divine palace. Of course, the premise of bribing was that they couldn't threaten the formless divine palace. It was still possible to pass on some information so that they would know about it as soon as possible. Chu Mu was expelled from the Sword Phase Palace. Just as he was about to leave, someone spread the news and let the giant elephant family know. Let's go, prepare to intercept them. This time, we can't let them escape. The giant elephant family's limit young dominator expert was called Giant Elephant Ancient Mountain. Last time, after failing to kill Chu Mu and becoming a disciple of Phaseless Palace, he was reprimanded by the family. This time he had to capture Chu Mu and his companion alive and bring them back to the family for punishment. A few sovereign realm experts from the giant elephant family left the formless giant city under the lead of the giant elephant ancient mountain. They were waiting for Chu Mu and the snow silver spirit. Chu Mu didn't know about this point. After over 20 years, he was completely immersed in the study and research of the Array Dao. He had already thrown the giant elephant family to the back of his mind. Even when he was expelled from the Sword Phase Hall and left the formless God Palace, he still didn't think about it. After flying for a while, when Chu Mu and the Snow Silver Spirit were a certain distance away from the formless mountain, they suddenly saw a few figures in front of them. Their speed was astonishing. In an instant, they spread out and formed a circle, surrounding Chu Mu and the Snow Silver Spirit. After over 20 years, Chu Mu and the Snow Silver Spirit had gradually adapted to the formless giant world's heavenly Tao. Their cultivation was no longer suppressed, and they had both recovered to the peak young dominator realm. However, They hadn't reached the limit of the young dominator realm yet. After all, it wasn't easy. You're finally here. These people's auras firmly locked onto Chu-Mu and the Snow Silver Spirit. They all sneered, obediently surrender, and follow us back to the giant elephant family. Perhaps we'll give you a good result. Hearing the other party's words, Chu-Mu finally remembered the giant elephant family. They still hadn't given up. Since they hadn't given up and had formed a circle, then it was time to deal with them. Previously, because their cultivation had been suppressed by the formless giant world's heavenly Tao, they didn't dare to act rashly. They were afraid that they would be severely injured by the formless giant world's heavenly Tao. Now, their cultivation had completely recovered, and they weren't suppressed at all. They could act recklessly. Although the giant elephant family had a total of 5 people, 1 at the limit of the young dominator realm and 4 at the peak young dominator realm, which was astonishing. Chu-Mu and the Snow Silver Spirit were also at the peak young dominator realm. Their strength was greater than their cultivation, and they had reached the limit of the young dominator realm. This was the territory of the formless divine palace. Naturally, someone had noticed them. Chu-Mu clenched his fists, showing his attitude directly. "Attack!" shouted the giant elephant ancient mountain. The 5 young dominator realm experts of the giant elephant family immediately attacked. Giant palms flipped the sky, and blade lights pierced through the sky. A giant copper seal fell down like a mountain. The might of a young dominator realm expert's attack was astonishing. Within a radius of 10,000 miles, the void was turbulent and storms were formed. It was as if the sky was about to be destroyed. Chu-Mu attacked with his sword, and so did Snow Silver Spirit. The terrifying sword light tore through the sky and attacked the 5 young dominator realm experts of the giant elephant family. An intense battle unfolded. The commotion was huge, and it quickly attracted many people to come and watch. The people of the formless divine palace were naturally attracted. Young dominator realm experts were indeed young dominator realm experts, especially when 7 young dominator realm experts were at least at the peak young dominator realm. Their might was even more astonishing. Not only were the disciples of the formless divine palace alarmed, even the elders of the formless divine palace were alarmed. They were all astonished. Who was it that was fighting in the territory of the formless divine palace? It's Chu-Mu. It's actually Chu-Mu. Where are those people? It's the people of the giant elephant family. I remember now. Previously, the giant elephant family had wanted Chu-Mu and his Tao companion. After Chu-Mu became a disciple of our formless divine palace, the giant elephant family didn't dare to make a move. I didn't expect them to wait for 20 years. He was just expelled by the sword phase hall, and now he encountered the 5 young dominator realm experts of the giant elephant family. This Chu-Mu's luck is really bad. Yeah, if he had given in to Yang Jinhong, he might not have been expelled. Who told him to have such a bad temper? It serves him right that he wasn't expelled. Although it was said that the disciples of the formless divine palace were like technical nerds, it wasn't absolute. There would always be people who liked to be jealous of others. They just couldn't bear to see others doing well, and they always liked those who were more outstanding than them to be in trouble. Yang Jinfei and the others naturally saw the battle between Chu-Mu and the 5 young dominator realm experts of the giant elephant family. If they can't hold on, I'll make a move. Elder Jian, Xuanzi said inwardly. The 5 young dominator realm experts of the giant elephant family were all veteran young dominator realm experts. They had been in their respective realms for many years, and they had complete inheritances. Their talents weren't weak either. Therefore, they were able to fully unleash their strength. They were very powerful, and they were stronger than ordinary young dominator realm experts. In addition, the 5 of them knew how to cooperate. Under their cooperation, their strength was even more tyrannical. Even when Chu-Mu and Xue Yinling teamed up, they could only fight to a draw. Such a result shocked many people, especially the people of the formless divine palace. They're actually so strong. Expelling him is a loss. What loss? When did our formless divine palace rely on this kind of strength to fight? Our formless divine palace is a formation cultivator. The two of you are indeed very strong. The giant elephant ancient mountain said as he attacked, "You don't look too old, and your talents are peerless. I can guarantee that as long as you surrender and follow us back to the giant elephant family and join us, you won't receive any punishment. Instead, you will be put in an important position." After the battle, the giant elephant ancient mountain had unleashed his full strength and cooperated with the other four young dominator realm experts. However, they were still unable to suppress Chu Mu and Shui Yinling. This made him extremely shocked, and he started to have other thoughts. The grudge between Chu Mu and the giant elephant family was actually very simple. The death of dozens of great emperors was nothing to the giant elephant family. The real loss was the death of a young dominator realm expert, but it was still within the acceptable range. Moreover, it was the giant elephant family's face. However, if the two of them could be successfully recruited and become part of the giant elephant family, they would become the sword of the giant elephant family and serve the family. Compared to the loss, the giant elephant family would gain many times more. Moreover, the two of them could fight across realms, which meant that their talents were shocking and their potential was limitless. Of course, if Chu Mu and Shui Yinling joined the giant elephant family, they wouldn't be able to gain the trust of the giant elephant family at first. However, once they joined the giant elephant family, they wouldn't be able to do anything. They would be slowly controlled and become loyal followers of the giant elephant family. The giant elephant ancient mountain wasn't sure whether the other party would agree or not, but he had to give it a try. At the very least, he wanted to disturb the other party's thoughts and affect the battle. However, Chu Mu and Shui Yinling didn't seem to have any intention of paying attention to him, and they continued to attack. Chu Mu and Shui Yinling cooperated very well, and they were able to display their full strength. Apart from some trump cards and secret techniques, they were able to display their full strength. If the giant elephant ancient mountain was alone, he would have been suppressed and defeated by the two of them. He might even be in danger of dying. However, when the giant elephant ancient mountain and the other four great perfection sovereign realm experts of the giant elephant family worked together, they were able to display their full strength. This brought a lot of pressure to Chu Mu and Shui Yinling. For a moment, no one was able to gain the upper hand. In the sovereign realm, it was extremely difficult to fight across realms. If there wasn't a huge difference in strength, it was impossible to defeat the other party, let alone kill the other party. Sometimes, even if the difference in strength was obvious, it was still difficult to kill the other party. After all, when one reached the sovereign realm, they would have some life-saving trump cards. They wouldn't use them easily, but once they used them, it would definitely be effective. The battle between the two sides had reached its climax. Chapter 2372. Mammoth Stomp. With a loud roar, the ancient mammoth mountain lifted its right leg and stomped down viciously. In an instant, the wind and clouds changed and the void trembled. In the huge vortex, a giant leg that was like a heavenly pillar came down viciously. Looking at its shape and lines, it seemed to be the leg of an ancient mammoth, and it came down violently with an overbearing force. Under the gigantic leg, the air was compressed and exploded. It swept in all directions and formed a terrifying storm. In the midst of the tremors, the ground seemed to have sunk 3 inches. Chu Mu and Shui Yinling immediately felt a terrifying pressure. This kind of pressure made their faces change drastically. It was as if the two of them would be flattened under the foot of that gigantic leg. Great Void Sword. Shui Yinling raised her sword, and a terrifying sword light tore through the sky. It slashed forward silently and collided with the gigantic leg. Longing. Wind sword attack. Let the wind carry away my longing. In an instant, the mammoth ancient mountain and the others paused slightly when the wind blew past them. It was as if they had recalled some beautiful memories from the past. When experts fought, the outcome could be decided in a single breath. The mammoth ancient mountain and the others instantly woke up. However, the sword light was already in front of them. It was even faster than the wind. The 5 of them roared furiously, and their strength exploded. They all used their defensive techniques to resist the wind sword attack. Blood spurted out. One sword attack had killed 5 of them. However, a minor Dominator Realm expert's self-healing ability was astonishing, and the giant elephant aristocratic family's bloodline was extraordinary. Their physiques were far stronger than ordinary minor Dominator Realm experts, granting them even more outstanding self-healing ability and defensive power. Otherwise, that sword might have killed one of them. The gigantic leg that was stomping down was instantly stopped by Xue Yinling's great void sword. Formation. The ancient mammoth mountain was infuriated as he bellowed. In an instant, the 5 of them quickly shifted their positions. With the ancient mammoth mountain as the center, the other 4 sovereign realm experts of the mammoth family spread out in 4 directions. The 5 of them formed hand seals at the same time, and their auras spread out. The mammoth family's cultivation technique was the same. It was called the mammoth skyscraping art. It wasn't created by the mammoth king. It was an inheritance that he had obtained by chance in his early years. It was the inheritance left behind by the mammoth king. When the mammoth skyscraping art reached a certain level, it would condense a trace of the ancient mammoth bloodline and obtain a trace of the power of the ancient mammoth. The ancient mammoth could destroy the stars and moon and cross the universe. Although it wasn't a chaos beast, it had a terrifying strength that wasn't inferior to the chaos beast. Their physique was extremely strong. Even if it was just condensing a trace of the ancient mammoth bloodline and obtaining a trace of power, it would allow the cultivators of the mammoth family to have a terrifying physique. It would make their strength stronger than ordinary cultivators of the same level. At this moment, the 5 of them were circulating the mammoth skyscraping art at the same time. Their strength and the trace of the ancient mammoth bloodline were stimulated. This formation was called the Mammoth Formation. It was a formation that the mammoth family had spent tens of thousands of years researching. Only the mammoth family could cultivate and master it. As the 5 of them circulated their cultivation techniques to the extreme, the void instantly shook under the stimulation of the power. A loud roar was heard in everyone's ears. It was sharp and long, as if an ancient mammoth was roaring in their ears. It made their scalps tingle and their bodies tremble. Their expressions changed greatly. The silhouettes of the 5 experts from the mammoth aristocrat clan vanished, and in their place, a gigantic elephant over 300 meters tall appeared in the air. That gigantic elephant was extremely lifelike, and its greenish-black skin seemed incomparably tough, containing a terrifying defense. Its 4 limbs were as sturdy as heavenly pillars, as though it could shatter the earth with a single stomp. Its long nose was raised, capable of plucking the stars and grabbing the moon. Its long curved teeth were even sharper than sabers. This giant elephant exuded an ancient aura. It was as if it could suppress the space and time in the void. Chu Mu and Xue Yinling were immediately under great pressure. "Let me use the snow god sword outfit," Xue Yinling said. "No, leave it to me," Chu Mu said. Xue Yinling didn't have any objections. She retreated directly and left the strong enemy to Chu Mu. She knew that Chu Mu wasn't a reckless person. Since he said he would leave it to him, he must be confident. Even if Chu Mu couldn't do anything to it, she could still use the snow god sword outfit. The 100-meter ancient mammoth raised its trunk, and like an enormous whip, it fiercely lashed out. A terrifying sound rang out, and the void seemed to be torn apart. A crack was forcibly created, and like lightning, it extended towards Chu Mu. This attack displayed unparalleled power. This kind of power had surpassed ordinary, peak sovereign realm experts. It was at the level of invincible sovereign realm experts. It was extremely terrifying. Chu Mu was talented, and his strength was obviously stronger than his cultivation. However, it was still difficult for him to be invincible among sovereign realm experts. Without the slightest hesitation, Chu Mu immediately used the third stage of World's End Near at Hand technique. The difference of a breath's time allowed him to rapidly retreat, avoiding the 300-meter ancient mammoth's whipping. The terrifying power practically brushed past him, causing Chu Mu to feel as if his body was about to be ripped apart. One had to know that Chu Mu, who cultivated the truth-seeking technique, had an extremely powerful physique. Compared to the same rank body cultivators, he wasn't the least bit inferior. In fact, to some extent, he was even a bit stronger. Even such a powerful physique would feel uncomfortable being swept by a gust of wind. If it were any other normal peak small dominator realm, they would probably be heavily injured by that gust of wind. Sword out. After quickly pulling apart the distance, Chu Mu let out a low roar. Suddenly, the light around his body flickered and quickly condensed. One sword after another instantly appeared. There were a total of 5 swords, each with different colors and emitting different auras. Oh, it's a formation sword. It seems to be a formation sword, but it doesn't seem to be. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth. 5 types of formation swords. Is he planning to use formation Dao to fight against the giant elephant family expert? I feel that it is very mysterious. He has only studied formation Dao for 20 years. It is too short. The people of Formless Divine Palace started to discuss. They felt that Chu Mu using formation Dao to fight against the giant elephant was an unwise move. With a long roar, the giant elephant rushed forward. The void was shaking. Under the giant leg, ripples spread out in the air. It contained a terrifying power. Ordinary peak sovereign realm experts would be severely injured and vomit blood if they were hit by the ripples. The giant elephant rushed forward. It used its long tusks as its weapon. Its power was shocking. Even a giant mountain would be crushed instantly. Just nice. I will use you to test the power of my sword formation. Chu Mu thought to himself. The myriad heavenly 5 elemental swords revolving around him began to rotate, releasing a shocking aura and light. The 5-colored light, under Chu Mu's control, quickly fused together under the mysteries of the formation he changed. The 5 swords also quickly fused together. 5 elements cycle sword. With a low roar, the 5-colored radiance condensed into one. Within the radiance, a huge sword formed by the intersection of 5 colors shot out under Chu Mu's control. Wherever it passed, the void would be ripped apart, leaving a pitch-black scar as it charged towards the charging elephant without any fear. This isn't a formation Dao, right? The secret disciples of Formless Divine Palace were surprised. It's a formation Dao, but it doesn't seem like a formation Dao. Elder Jian, Xuanzi thought as his eyes flickered. He was an elder of Sword Aspect Hall. The Sword Aspect Hall's formation Dao was mainly based on sword formation. Therefore, there was more or less a connection between the cultivators of Sword Aspect Hall and sword cultivators. Elder Jian Xuanzi was a great sovereign realm expert and was also a formation Dao master. His attainments in formation Dao were shocking. Therefore, when he saw what Chu Mu used to saw the mystery. However, it was because he saw the mystery that he was so shocked. He saw some traces of Sword Aspect Hall's formation Dao in the formation Dao that Chu Mu used. However, it was different. This was what shocked him the most. Could it be that he modified Sword Aspect Hall's formation Dao and turned it into his own formation Dao? Elder Jian, Xuanzi guessed. He couldn't help but tremble. Even he, a formation Dao master, couldn't do it. Unless he reached the level of formation Dao master. In the entire Sword Aspect Hall, the only formation Dao master on the surface was the Hall master. It was said that some supreme elders had also reached the level of formation Dao master, but they hadn't appeared for many years. Could it be that Chu Mu's Formation Dao attainments had reached the level of Formation Dao Master? No, this was impossible. Even if he was extremely talented, it was impossible for him to reach it now. Then what was going on? Elder Jian Xuanzi had a myriad of thoughts. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't understand. In Formless Palace, there were many Formation Dao Masters like him. Naturally, they had the ability to see through the mystery of the sword formation that Chu Mu used. Therefore, they were shocked. Just as everyone was having a myriad of thoughts, the huge five-colored sword light collided with the galloping giant elephant. The galloping giant elephant's power was extremely terrifying. The void shook and the five-colored sword light instantly shattered under the collision. However, the giant elephant's galloping momentum also paused slightly and its aura was obstructed. The five elements revolving sword was almost disintegrated under the collision. This made Chu Mu realize that although the five elements revolving sword wasn't weak, it wasn't enough to fight against this ancient giant elephant that could be said to be invincible in the minor sovereign realm. After all, this was formed by the five minor sovereign realm experts of the giant elephant family using their own bloodline power through the formation. They borrowed a trace of the ancient giant elephant's power to condense it. It had an extremely terrifying power and was enough to run amok in the minor sovereign realm. Only great sovereign realm experts could defeat it. The five elements revolving sword isn't perfect and needs more time. Right now, I don't have time to perfect it, but I still have a stronger sword formation. Chu Mu thought to himself. He summoned the five elements revolving sword and it instantly disintegrated. Shortly after, sword light flickered around him and another three all heavens swords were condensed. All heavens wind sword, all heavens ice sword, all heavens lightning sword. A total of 8 all heavens swords revolved around Chu Mu and released an even more shocking aura. Chapter 2373. The 8 all heavens swords were overflowing with radiance. The terrifying aura was accompanied by waves of sharpness, as if it could pierce through anything and everything. Combine! Chu Mu shouted as he clasped his hands together. The 8 all heavens swords around him instantly released their radiance to the extreme. They transformed into 8 rays of light that rapidly closed in. The terrifying sharpness pierced through the sky, causing people to be unable to look directly at them. Strange and ear-piercing metallic sounds continuously rang out. There was a total of 8 sounds. Then, a huge sword that emitted 8 different colors appeared in front of Chu Mu. It seemed like a sword that only a giant could use. 8 extreme heaven splitting sword, go. Chu Mu's eyes flickered with a sharp glint. With a wave of his hand, the enormous sword that emitted 8 different colors and a world-shaking sharpness instantly broke through the air and flew towards the madly charging ancient mammoth. Speaking of which, it seemed like a long time had passed since Chu Mu disintegrated the 5 elements revolving sword and reformed it into the 8 extreme heaven splitting sword. But in reality, it was only an instant. 8 extreme heaven splitting sword. That strike was extremely powerful, and it was far stronger than the 5 elements revolving sword from before. It made all the little sovereign realm experts feel a chill. They were sure that they weren't a match for that strike, and it was impossible for them to resist it. Then, would this ancient mammoth that had the power of a sovereign realm expert be able to resist it? Soon, everyone knew the answer. The 8-colored huge sword arrived, carrying an unparalleled sharpness and tyranny. The ancient mammoth charged frantically, its entire body berserk and tyrannical. A clash between 2 powerful forces. With a rumble, everyone felt as if this space-time was in the middle of a stormy sea. It was turbulent without end, and there was actually energy that wantonly rushed in all directions, surging violently. The sharp rumble came from afar, as if a wave was rushing over from the horizon. Many people were shocked and hurriedly retreated, fearing that they would be affected. After the sound wave passed, the remnant energy dissipated, and everyone could finally see clearly. The frantically charging ancient mammoth stopped, and the 8-colored huge sword was sent flying. It instantly disintegrated in the void, turning into 8 different colored rays of light. 8 phases heaven-locking sword formation. Chu Mu let out a low shout, and 8 sword lights of different colors instantly descended, landing in all directions around the ancient mammoth that had stopped. The sword lights of different colors shot out from the swords, transforming into 8 thick chains of different colors that rapidly extended out, sweeping past the ancient mammoth's body and rapidly intertwining, directly binding the ancient mammoth. What an exquisite sword formation! Elder Jian Xuanzi and the other formation masters exclaimed. This sword formation doesn't seem to belong to the sword phase hall. Where did this person come from? The ancient mammoth instantly started to struggle, wanting to break free from the bindings of the 8 chains. The chains were stretched taut, and everyone felt as if the space around them was being pulled taut as well. The ancient mammoth continued to struggle, and its terrifying power shook the void. Chu Mu's expression was cold, and his forehead was slightly sweaty. He had to tighten the 8 phases heaven-locking sword formation to be able to bind the ancient mammoth, but this required his concentration. Xue Yinling stood not far away to prevent any accidents. The truth-seeking technique was fully activated, and a tyrannical power surged. The illusory image of the truth millstone appeared behind Chu Mu's back, and as it spun, it exuded boundless mysteries and an aura that could suppress the heavens. Above his head, a sword light soared into the sky, carrying a boundless, mysterious aura. It was the sword principle origin of all heavens. What kind of origin is that? The surrounding dominators stared at the origin above Chu Mu's head in astonishment. Even some of the more knowledgeable dominators couldn't tell what origin it was. That should be a kind of mixed origin, and it seems to have fused the mysteries of many origins, said a dominator expert. This mixed origin should be a mixed origin with sword principle as its main component. As he spoke, the ancient mammoth's power exploded to the extreme, and the 8 chains were also stretched to the extreme. If it continued, they would be forcibly broken. Around Chu Mu, a golden red and a dark green sword light appeared, and instantly condensed into the All Heavens Yang sword and All Heavens Yin sword. Yin and Yang were famous, great Taoists of the chaotic universe. Whether in terms of power or mysteries, they surpassed the 5 elements and 8 phases, light and darkness, and so on. The Tai Chi Great Tao, formed by the fusion of Yin and Yang Great Taoists, was one of the top Great Taoists of the chaotic universe. This was also the mystery that Chu Mu and Xue Yinling had comprehended after traveling the chaotic universe, and they had fused it into the All Heavens sword principle origin to form a sword. Yin Yang phaseless sword. The All Heavens Yang sword and All Heavens Yin sword merged into an even larger sword, one side golden red and the other dark green. Under Chu Mu's control, it instantly shot out and attacked the ancient mammoth that was bound by the 8 phases heaven-locking sword formation. Chu Mu was able to multitask, and controlling the 8 phases heaven-locking sword formation and the yin-yang phaseless sword was not a problem. The yin-yang phaseless sword was very powerful because it not only contained the power of the All Heavens Yang sword and All Heavens Yin sword, but also the power of the formation. It stimulated the power of the 2 to the extreme, and then the power of the yin-yang phaseless sword was strengthened. Without the power of the formation, the yin-yang sword attack, formed by the All Heavens Yang sword and All Heavens Yin sword, would not be able to compare to the yin-yang phaseless sword, and it would be at least several times weaker. The yin-yang phaseless sword stabbed at the ancient mammoth. The bound ancient mammoth struggled with all its might, but it was unable to break free from the 8 phases heaven-locking sword formation. It did not have enough power to resist, and its defenses were immediately pierced. Under Chu Mu's control, the yin-yang phaseless sword fiercely slashed, and a huge cut was left on the ancient mammoth's body. The injured ancient mammoth was furious, and it erupted with all its strength to struggle wildly. The first chain was instantly broken, and the loud sound made everyone's heart skip a beat. It was somewhat uncomfortable. The first chain was broken, and then the second chain was broken. Not good. Chu Mu's expression changed greatly, and the power of the Imperial God sword technique exceeded its limit. Subsequently, the immemorial sword seal also erupted. Sword light continuously flickered between his eyebrows, and there were no less than 20 rays. Its sharpness increased by 2 times, and when it was added to the yin-yang phaseless sword, the power of the yin-yang phaseless sword greatly increased. Chop! The yin-yang phaseless sword fiercely chopped down, as if it was going to split the sky into yin and yang. Under the terrifying sharpness, it directly cut through the ancient mammoth's defenses like a hot knife through butter. The third chain was broken once again, and Chu Mu controlled the yin-yang phaseless sword to attack the ancient mammoth once again. Every time a chain was broken, the ancient mammoth suffered an attack. When all the chains were broken, Chu Mu's yin-yang phaseless sword had killed the ancient mammoth 8 times. Each time it left a huge wound, and its aura overflowed. Yin-yang boundary lock. In an instant, the yin-yang phaseless sword disintegrated, turning into golden red and dark green rays of light that wrapped around the injured ancient mammoth. It only took a breath's time. The 8 broken chains disappeared and turned back into 8 swords. Under Chu Mu's control, they instantly gathered and reformed into the 8 Extreme Heaven Splitting Sword. The 8 Extreme Heaven Splitting Sword seemed to shatter the sky as it fell like a meteor, and it carried an extremely terrifying power. This kind of attack was originally able to kill an ordinary peak Sovereign Realm expert, and had reached the level of being invincible in the Sovereign Realm. However, the ancient mammoth was injured, and its strength was clearly weakened. It was simply unable to resist this sword. The rumbling sound came from afar, and it was extremely sharp, as if it wanted to tear apart everyone's eardrums. Under the sword, an incomparably intense light exploded, and that light attacked in all directions, surging violently, making it difficult for people to look directly at it, and also difficult for them to hear it. Under the 8 Extreme Heaven Splitting Sword, the ancient mammoth finally couldn't bear it and disintegrated. When the light dissipated, everyone saw that the 5 Sovereign Realm experts of the giant elephant family were all pale. Although there wasn't any blood on their bodies, their auras were weak. With a single glance, it was obvious that they were heavily injured. Chu Mu also didn't have it easy. He had exhausted most of his strength and couldn't continue to maintain the 8 Extreme Heaven Splitting Sword. It scattered back into 8 heavenly swords and instantly fell. Stop! The giant elephant ancient mountain's expression changed greatly, and he hurriedly roared. However, this couldn't stop Chu Mu's killing intent. The battle had reached this stage, and it wasn't easy for him to defeat the opponent's ancient mammoth. How could Chu Mu hold back? That was definitely the action of a fool. The 8 sword light was incomparably sharp, and it instantly pierced through the 5 Sovereign Realm experts of the giant elephant family, especially through the space between their eyebrows. It directly crushed their brains and destroyed their souls, and they couldn't be more dead. After killing them, Chu Mu hurriedly used the first level of the truth-seeking technique to quickly recover. In a breath's time, his exhausted strength rapidly recovered. In the distance, everyone was stunned. They all felt that the scene in front of them was so illusory. A complete Sovereign Realm sword cultivator had actually defeated the ancient mammoth, which was equivalent to an invincible Sovereign Realm expert in a one-on-one battle. In the end, he had even killed 5 Sovereign Realm experts. This kind of terrifying strength made them feel incomparably shocked. It was really too terrifying to be able to fight across such a large distance. After 8 breaths, Chu Mu's strength had completely recovered, and his face had become rosy. The 10 heavenly swords revolved around him, and shortly after, the spatial rings of the 5 Sovereign Realm experts of the giant elephant family all fell into Chu Mu's hands. Ling, or let's go. Chumu said and moved again. He and Shui Yinling quickly flew into the sky. They had killed 5 sovereign realm experts of the giant elephant family. Among them 4 complete sovereign realm experts, and one was at the peak sovereign realm. This kind of loss was not only to the giant elephant family, but also to the phaseless palace. It was a disastrous loss. It could be foreseen that the giant elephant family would definitely go crazy, and sovereign realm experts would definitely come out to hunt them down. Chu Mu and Shui Yinling's strength wasn't bad, but it was limited to the sovereign realm. If any sovereign realm expert attacked, it would be difficult for them to resist. Of course, Shui Yinling had a trump card, but she couldn't always rely on it. Her own strength had to be strong enough. If they couldn't resist, the best way was to not fight. While the giant elephant family hadn't reacted yet, they had to leave this large world. Chapter 2374. Seeing Chu Mu and Shui Yinling's figures turn into 2 sword light and fly away, the people who were watching from afar finally reacted. They realized what had happened, and their expressions changed greatly. The giant elephant family was one of the top 10 forces in the phaseless world. Even though it was not as good as the phaseless palace, it still had a terrifying foundation and strength. Now that 5 important sovereign realm experts had died, it was a heavy loss. They would definitely go crazy. A top 10 force that went crazy was not to be trifled with. It would definitely cause a commotion. What they did not know was that Chu Mu and Shui Yinling were not from the phaseless world. Their current goal was to leave the phaseless world. What a pity, what a pity. Elder Jian, Xuanzi sighed softly. In fact, it was not only him. Many people could see that Chu Mu had used a strange sword formation to defeat the ancient giant elephant. Although they could not understand the profoundness of it, they could be sure that it was a kind of formation. This kind of matrix way was not recorded in the phaseless palace. Even with their abilities, they could judge that there was no such matrix way in the entire phaseless world. At least, they had lived for so long and read countless books, but they had not found a matrix way that was similar to it. This could be considered a brand new matrix way. Moreover, the formation was extremely compatible with Chu Mu's sword. They could not help but suspect that this formation was created by Chu Mu himself. Only something created by himself could be most compatible with himself. A peerless genius who could create a formation that was very compatible with its power was expelled by the Sword Phase Palace. There was no doubt that this would make the Sword Phase Palace a laughingstock. As for the so-called disregard of the Sword Phase Palace's honor for his own benefit, this could only fool those who did not know. Those who knew about it all sneered. It was nothing more than some conflict. To put it bluntly, the mistake had nothing to do with Chu Mu. In the final analysis, it was because of jealousy. However, things had already come to this point. It was useless to say anything. There was no way to reverse it. Yang Jinfei was in a daze because he had witnessed Chu Mu's terrifying strength with his own eyes. If Chu Mu wanted to kill him with such strength, a single move would be enough. As for His Highness Yang Jinhong, his expression was extremely gloomy and ugly. Similarly, although his cultivation wasn't weak, he was only at the initial stage of Lesser Sovereign Realm. Compared to the strength that Chu Mu had displayed, he was like an ant. Now he and his younger brother Yang Jinfei had completely become laughingstocks. Their prestige in the Sword Minister Hall had obviously declined by a lot, and was not as good as the other palace masters. In the future competition, it would be even more difficult for them to become the palace master. It could be said that this time the gains did not make up for the losses. Yang Jinhong was very angry. If Yang Jinhong was not his biological brother, he would have slapped him to death. Now, there was simply no room for regret. He only hoped that Chu Mu and Yi Zichen would be chased to death by the giant elephant clanspeople, and only then would the hatred in his heart be resolved. As for Elder Jian Xuanzi, after returning to the Sword Phase Hall, he went into seclusion and did not come out. Elephant City. Within the giant elephant clan, waves of terrifying aura soared into the sky. causing everyone in Elephant City to be in a panic. It was as if the end of the world was coming. This was the aura that belonged to great sovereign realm experts, and it was incomparably terrifying. Immediately after, the aura of two great sovereign realm experts rapidly left Elephant City, and the feeling of the end of the world gradually disappeared. Everyone let out a sigh of relief, but they were secretly guessing what exactly had happened. From the aura, they could feel the fury and killing intent contained within. Something big must have happened, and it was something that was unfavorable to the giant elephant clan. Otherwise, it wouldn't be like this. Who was it? Who dared to provoke the giant elephant clan? Everyone was very curious, but no one dared to pursue because it would provoke the giant elephant clan. The two great sovereign realm experts of the giant elephant clan rushed towards the phaseless giant city at an astonishing speed. However, the distance between the giant elephant city and the phaseless giant city was very far. Even if the great sovereign realm experts flew at full speed, they wouldn't be able to arrive in a short period of time. By the time the two great sovereign realm experts arrived outside the phaseless giant city, a day had already passed. At this moment, Chu Mu and Shui Yinling were sitting in a huge flying boat. This flying boat was actually a realm-crossing airship, and outside the realm-crossing airship was the chaotic universe. The realm-crossing airship's speed was extremely fast, and it wasn't inferior to the full-speed flight of a great sovereign realm expert. In fact, it was much faster than the full-speed flight of an ordinary great sovereign realm expert. One day was enough for them to rush out of the phaseless world and enter the chaotic universe. However, the crisis wasn't over yet. The two great sovereign realm experts of the giant elephant clan used various methods to quickly find out where Chu Mu and Shui Yinling had gone. Without hesitation, they chased after them to the chaotic universe. The hatred between Chu Mu and Shui Yinling and the giant elephant clan couldn't be resolved. The giant elephant clan's hatred towards them couldn't be washed away by the torrential waters of the Milky Way. However, the realm-crossing airship had flown at full speed, and had been a day since then. Even if the two great sovereign realm experts of the giant elephant clan knew where to go, they couldn't catch up in a short period of time. After chasing for about a month, they could only follow the aura left behind by the realm-crossing airship, but they couldn't find any trace of it. Between the two of us, one of us needs to help oversee the clan. We can't be away for too long. The great elder of the giant elephant clan said to the other great sovereign realm expert. This person belonged to the secret force of the giant elephant clan. You go back, I'll chase after them. This person was dressed in black and he wore a mask. It was impossible to see his face clearly, but his voice was hoarse and dry, which made people feel uncomfortable. Okay. The great elder of the giant elephant clan nodded and turned to leave without hesitation. Indeed, as one of the top 10 forces of the phaseless world, the giant elephant clan was very powerful. This was because there were at least two great sovereign realm experts overseeing the clan, and dozens of minor sovereign realm experts. Apart from the phaseless palace, the other top forces weren't willing to have any major conflicts with the giant elephant clan under normal circumstances. However, if the two great sovereign realm experts of the giant elephant clan hadn't returned, it was hard to be sure that the other top forces wouldn't act. With or without great sovereign realm experts overseeing the clan, the consequences were completely different. It was undoubtedly unwise to put the clan in danger in order to chase after two murderers. There was only one pursuer left, but if there were no accidents, it would be impossible for him to catch up with the realm-crossing airship that Chu Mu and Shui Yinling were on. I plan to cultivate in seclusion for a period of time. In the realm-crossing airship, Chu Mu said to Shui Yinling, this time, I've studied the formation Tao in the Phaseless Palace for more than 20 years, and the battle with the experts of the giant elephant clan has allowed me to have a deeper understanding of the formation Tao. This formation Tao has been modified by me, and it's more suitable for me. However, I feel that it's still not enough. Shui Yinling nodded. Although Chu Mu's words were somewhat mysterious, she could understand. To put it bluntly, Chu Mu wanted to integrate the formation Tao into the sword Tao of all heavens. In this way, he would need to comprehend the sword Tao and the formation Tao again, and then integrate them to form a new sword Tao. This would require Chu Mu to spend energy and time. There was no doubt that overthrowing the sword Tao that he had created before meant that he had to reforge it. This required a great deal of courage, because it could succeed or fail. If it failed, all his previous efforts would be wasted. If it succeeded, there was no guarantee that it would be better than the original sword Tao. However, Chu Mu dared to do this, because he was very confident that the new sword Tao would be more perfect and its power would be more powerful. It was because of this that he wanted to reforge the sword Tao without hesitation. After informing Shui Yinling, Chu Mu began to cultivate in seclusion, and the realm-crossing airship was controlled by Shui Yinling. It was not easy to reforge the sword Tao, and there was no room for sloppiness. Chu Mu did not rush to reforge the sword Tao, but thought about it first. Reforging the sword Tao was just an idea, and there were only some clues. Although he was sure that it had unlimited potential, it was not clear enough. Chu Mu spent a total of 3 years to completely straighten out everything related to reforging the sword Tao. He also straightened out the myriad heavens, sword Tao, and the formation Tao he modified. "Then, let's begin," muttered Chu Mu as he began to reforge his sword path. The sword Tao itself was an illusory existence, an existence that belonged to the willpower level. It was very mysterious and could not be seen or touched. It could not be like building a house, where one could tear it down and rebuild it. The sword Tao of all heavens that Chu Mu had created was his willpower and belief. To reforge the sword Tao, the first step was to shatter the foundation of the sword Tao, which was equivalent to shattering the willpower and belief with one's own hands. This was the process of destruction and creation, and it had to be done. The process of shattering one's own sword Tao was very painful, as if one was shattering one's own body and soul. The pain made Chu Mu tremble all over, and his face turned pale. Cold sweat kept coming out, and it soaked his clothes. After the sword Tao of all heavens was shattered, Chu Mu could no longer use all the sword moves of the sword Tao of all heavens that he had mastered. It could be said that his current strength had greatly decreased, and he could not even unleash the power of a complete minor sovereign. At best, he could only fight against an ordinary minor sovereign expert like Deshang. His strength had dropped from the limits of the minor sovereign realm to the high stages of the minor sovereign realm. This drop was simply too great. Fortunately, Chu Mu was going to reforge the sword Tao, and he was going to start with the first step. First, destruction, then creation. While enduring the pain of the sword Tao being shattered, Chu Mu calmed his mind and focused, and started the second step of reforging the sword Tao. The second step was to straighten out the new sword Tao. This new sword Tao was based on the original sword Tao, and then fused with his own modified formation Tao, allowing the two to be perfectly combined. After the second step was completed, it was time for the third step, which was also the final step. After the perfect combination of the original sword Tao and formation Tao, it became a new sword Tao. Chapter 2375. The huge domain-crossing flyboat was like a giant beast. The chaotic universe was boundless, making the domain-crossing flyboat seem very small. It sped past without making any sound. Inside the flying boat, Shui Yinling controlled the flying boat to fly at full speed while paying attention to the movements from all directions. She also kept an eye on Chu Mu's closed-door cultivation from time to time. Shui Yinling had never experienced the process of reforging the sword principle, but she knew how dangerous it was. She couldn't help but worry. The first step of reforging the sword principle had been completed. Chu Mu had begun the second step of fusing the sword principle and the formation principle. Whether it was the sword principle or the formation principle, they were intangible things that couldn't be seen or touched. In the end, they were a kind of use of one's own strength, understanding and mastery of the mysteries of the universe. It was just that the methods were different and the paths were different. To fuse them, one had to find the common point between the two and use that as an entry point. In theory, all principles belong to the mysteries of the universe. There would be similarities between them more or less, but some are more obvious and some are more obscure. Since Chu-Mu had the confidence to reforge the sword principle, he naturally had the confidence to find the common point between the sword principle and the formation principle. He even had some ideas before he went into closed-door cultivation. However, the first step of reforging the sword principle, the shattering sword principle, made him suffer great pain. On the one hand, he had to endure the pain. On the other hand, he had to find the common point. After finding it, he had to fuse it, which was more difficult and took more time. Immediately after the domain-crossing flyboat, a figure flew at an astonishing speed. There seemed to be a shadow spreading out from his body. He was like a phantom of a giant elephant, giving off an extremely powerful aura as if he was going to suppress the world. This person was the secret Grand Dominator expert of the giant elephant family, Ancient Giant Elephant. In terms of cultivation strength, Ancient Giant Elephant was not weaker than the Grand Elder of the giant elephant family. He was even stronger, second only to the family leader of the giant elephant family. As for the giant elephant lord, who had founded the giant elephant family, he had already gone out to travel. No one knew where he had gone. After chasing for a long time, Ancient Giant Elephant still couldn't catch up, even if he flew at full speed. However, Ancient Giant Elephant was very patient because he belonged to the secret power of the giant elephant family. At first, he was trained like an assassin. However, he had a fortuitous encounter and finally broke through to the Grand Dominator expert. In terms of patience, he had plenty of it. At that moment, the ancient mammoth was treating Chu-Mu and the snow silver spirit as its prey. It was enjoying the process of chasing its prey. Inside the domain-crossing airship, in the secret room where Chu-Mu was in, countless rays of light of different colors shot out from Chu-Mu's body. In addition to their unique chi, each ray of light also emitted a sharpness that belonged only to swords. This was sword chi. After countless sword auras shot out, they circled around Chu-Mu's surroundings and rapidly flowed. As they changed, they landed in different locations and unexpectedly emitted a very peculiar and mysterious aura. Sword Chi formation. One formation after another formed by Sword Chi was distributed around Chu-Mu's body. The whole secret room was filled with Sword Chi. They were all operating and overflowing with light, with Chu-Mu as the center. For a moment, there was a feeling that the galaxy was rotating like a whirlpool. Large formations intersected with small formations, as if a large galaxy contained a small galaxy. This kind of mystery was completely out of Chu-Mu's expectation, because from the fusion of sword principle and formation principle, it was not under his control. It rotated according to the mysterious laws of the universe and slowly took shape. Gradually, strands of sword chi condensed into the appearance of stars, decorating the secret room like a miniature version of the universe. In Chu-Mu's mind, he naturally recalled the stars' trajectories and other things he had seen during his travels in the chaotic universe. Every one of them was natural and full of truth. Under the influence of his thoughts, the formation formed by the sword chi stars around him was also undergoing subtle adjustments. It slowly changed from a starry sky to a starry sky. When it was adjusted to a certain extent, a deep, vast, and mysterious aura spread out from every sword chi star. In an instant, it was extremely sudden. Even if the seclusion room could isolate the energy very well, part of it was still leaked out. Xue Yinling was startled. She quickly paid attention to the secret room where Chu-Mu was and saw the magical scene. It was as profound and mysterious as the real starry sky, which made people yearn for it. At the same time, under the influence of the dissipation of energy, the silhouettes of stars appeared out of thin air outside the spaceship. The silhouettes of stars quickly condensed into small formations, and each formation was like a small galaxy. They formed into larger formations, and then into the largest formation. As the formation rotated, it immediately emitted an earth-shattering and mysterious aura that spread in all directions. It made Mammoth Archaic, who was chasing inside the spaceship, tremble. His face suddenly changed. This kind of chi. His speed was affected. He stared ahead, but he could only see a patch of darkness. That kind of chi did not last for long. At most, it lasted for a few breaths of time before disappearing, but it set off a storm in his heart. In terms of the strength of the aura, he was not afraid because it belonged to the level of a minor sovereign. At most, it had reached the limit of the minor sovereign. Even if he was invincible in the minor sovereign realm, he was not a match for a great sovereign. Moreover, his strength was not comparable to someone who had just entered the great sovereign realm. What really made him afraid was the mystery contained in the aura. It was indescribably vast and profound. It made him feel like he was facing the vast universe. Was it an illusion? Mammoth Archaic shook his head. After all, the aura lasted for a very short time, and it was so mysterious that he did not dare to believe it. It doesn't matter if it was an illusion or not. Those who kill my mammoth family deserve to die, Mammoth Archaic said to himself. He used his speed to chase again. After a few breaths, the starry sky illusion disappeared. In the secret room of the spaceship, the starry sky illusion was also withdrawn and disappeared into Chu Mu's forehead. The second step of reforging the sword Tao was completed. Next was the third step, which was also the final step. This was the most crucial step. There was absolutely no room for error. Otherwise, not only would all his previous efforts be wasted, Chu Mu's sword Tao would also be abandoned. It would affect the origin of the sword Tao, and so on. The consequences would be very serious. However, Chu Mu was not nervous at all. Firstly, he was confident. If he was only 90% confident in the beginning, then after he completed the first and second steps, through the accumulation and comprehension of the first two steps, he had 100% confidence in the third step. Secondly, even if he was nervous, it would be useless. It would be better to deal with it calmly. Only then would he be able to complete it better. Chu Mu's spiritual world changed greatly. It was completely different from before. The spiritual world changed once again, as if it had turned into the void of the universe. A huge star array was slowly rotating. Within the big array, there were other arrays nested within the array, and within the array, there were smaller arrays nested within the array. They were all interconnected, and it was extremely mysterious. At the center was the origin of the sword Tao that Chu Mu had condensed. It could be seen that as the starry formation outside rotated, the origin of the sword Tao also underwent subtle changes. These changes followed the principles of the universe and became more compatible with the universe. It became more profound and mysterious. Chu Mu did not interfere. He could not interfere. He only observed carefully and comprehended the mysteries within. All sorts of insights surged into his mind. Time flew by unknowingly. Chu Mu did not know how much time had passed. Suddenly, the starry formation in the spiritual world shrank and sank into the origin of the sword Tao. It merged with the origin of the sword Tao that had been finely adjusted. There was a great burst of light. Chu Mu seemed to hear the cries of swords from all over the universe. Each of them was different and had their own unique rhythm. Within the origin of the way of the sword, countless mysteries of the universe seemed to have transformed into sharp swords and then condensed into stars. The stars were filled with astonishing sword chi and formed into formations that were nested and interlocked with each other. It was extremely mysterious. I see. Chu Mu exhaled and said to himself. It was only now that he had a deeper understanding of the chaotic universe. Sword Tao of the heavens, cast! With a low roar, countless sword light shot out from the origin of the sword Tao of the heavens and surrounded Chu Mu. As it rotated, It made Chumu feel as if he was in the universe. It was extremely colorful and magnificent. In the next moment, countless sword lights streaked across different trajectories. Each trajectory was extremely mysterious and contained the principles of the universe. They entered Chumu's body from various angles and merged with the sword Tao of the heavens. When the last sword light entered his body, an indescribable feeling arose spontaneously. It made Chumu feel as if he was connected to the universe and could control everything. It was as if everything was under his control. His aura rose steadily. Not only did it recover to the complete lesser sovereign realm, it also strengthened continuously. It reached the peak of the complete lesser sovereign realm and then broke through the limit of the lesser sovereign realm. A tyrannical and shocking sharpness swept through the secret room as if it was going to destroy it. Countless sword light emerged from Chumu's body, making him look like a sharp sword that could tear the universe apart. On a closer look, one would discover that the sword light was formed by countless minute energies. It was like a series of interlocking formations. The origin of the sword Tao of the heavens and the sword Tao of the heavens are originally of the same origin. Previously, I created the sword style of the heavens in order to unleash the power of the sword Tao of the heavens. Only now do I know that it was just an embryonic form. The true sword Tao of the heavens is a sword Tao that combines the origin of the sword Tao of the heavens and the sword Tao of the heavens. As for the formation Tao, it is the best way to combine the two. Since then, the recasting of the sword Tao was completed. In terms of power and potential, it was better than before. His cultivation had also broken through. Chapter 2376. Wormholes that looked like tunnels were everywhere. They seemed to be connected to the end of the universe. A spaceship stopped here. Two figures flew out of the spaceship. They were a man and a woman. They looked very young. They were Chumu and Shui Yinling. After leaving the phaseless great world, after 100 years of continuous flight, with the speed of the cross-domain flying ship, they had already flown very far away from the phaseless great world. Chumu spent a few decades to reforge his sword principle. Then he spent another few decades to integrate what he had learned. He created various moves according to the new sword principle of the heavens. He could unleash his power to the fullest. In 100 years, Shui Yinling's cultivation also broke through the complete minor dominator realm. She reached the limit of the minor dominator realm. Her sword principle of the void was further perfected. In the 100 years of flying, they encountered many dangers. For example, they encountered a cosmic storm. There are strong and weak cosmic storms. The weaker cosmic storms could threaten a minor dominator. The strongest cosmic storms could even threaten a demigod sovereign. The cosmic storm that Chumu and Shui Yinling encountered was a medium one. It could threaten a grand dominator. Fortunately, they were in the spaceship. This spaceship had been left behind by the demigod sovereign of the Snow Clan. It was faster than ordinary spaceships and had stronger defenses. That was why it could withstand the cosmic storm. The cosmic storm was extremely fast. It was more than 10 times faster than the spaceship. It swept the spaceship along and flew for a few decades. The few decades in the cosmic storm were comparable to the few hundred years in the spaceship. It brought Chumu and Shui Yinling to an even stranger place. In the distance, countless stars flickered, adding a bit of profoundness and mystery to this quiet universe. Chumu looked, and for a moment he was a little absent-minded. He felt that the new all-heavens sword-way origin in his spiritual world was also spinning faster, and his body was gradually filled with a feeling of becoming one with the universe. Shui Yinling didn't disturb Chumu. Instead, she protected Chumu. She knew that it was rare to be in such a state. Cultivators paid attention to the unity of heaven and man that would allow them to better understand the mysteries of the universe. Chumu's current state was more advanced than the unity of heaven and man. It was a preliminary unity with the universe. He could feel the mysteries of the universe more deeply. Around them, there were a total of 9 whirlpools rotating. Those were the entrances to wormholes. According to their understanding, such wormholes were either naturally formed in the universe or created by ancient demigod sovereigns who had mastered the power of time and space. They would connect to places far, far away. As for where, the two of them had no idea. Time passed, and the starlight was still shining brightly. The 9 space-time wormholes were still spinning. A powerful aura approached. From afar, it looked like a huge ancient elephant was running towards them. Shui Yinling's expression changed drastically. She took a look at Chumu and flew towards the elephant's shadow. She unsheathed her long sword and performed Great Void Sword, tearing through the universe, void and tearing it apart. Shui Yinling's cultivation was at the pinnacle of the Young Dominator realm, but she was undefeatable in the Young Dominator realm. The Great Void Sword was extremely powerful, but it had been shattered by the elephant shadow. The black elephant seemed to have come from the depths of hell. It carried a terrifying, murderous intent. This was the aura of a grand dominator. Although Shui Yinling was powerful, she couldn't stop it. Chu Mu's state of being one with the universe was immediately broken. It was a pity, but he knew that the situation was urgent. He couldn't continue comprehending. Ling, let's go. Without any hesitation, Chu Mu yelled. At the same time, his 2 hands gripped the air and 2 swords appeared. They shot out a dense sword aura that formed a terrifying storm that shot forward. Chu Mu didn't expect his attack to destroy the black elephant. He just wanted to buy some time so that Shui Yinling could retreat quickly. After Shui Yinling used the Great Void Sword again, she quickly retreated. She rushed towards one of the whirlpools with Chu Mu. She wanted to escape through the wormhole. They could see that the grand dominator of the giant elephant family was chasing after them. Even though they were both at the pinnacle of the Young Dominator realm and were invincible among the Young Dominator realm, the difference between the Young Dominator realm and the Grand Dominator realm was too big. It was like a qualitative change. Even if they worked together and used all their trump cards, they might not be able to defeat the enemy. Since that was the case, there was no need to waste their energy. He instantly entered a space-time wormhole. 3 breaths later, the shadow of a huge black elephant appeared. A mysterious man in black clothes and a mask also appeared. He slapped out with his palm. The terrifying power was like the cry of a huge elephant. It fiercely bombarded the space-time wormhole, causing the space-time wormhole to tremble. The wormhole was either formed naturally in the universe or built by a demigod sovereign. It was very stable. Even a grand dominator couldn't destroy it. However, it could still shake it. The wormhole had to be stable during the teleportation process. Once it was shaken, unexpected things could happen. Chu Mu and Shui Yinling, who were inside the wormhole, felt the slight vibration of the wormhole. Their expressions immediately changed, and they hurriedly raised their strength to the maximum to protect themselves against the pressure of the wormhole. However, the 2 of them were separated by this force, one in front and one behind. This power was too strong. Even a Grand Dominator realm expert couldn't control himself. Only a demigod sovereign could come and go as he pleased. The wormhole only shook slightly and quickly stabilized. Don't even think about escaping. When the ancient elephant saw that the wormhole had stabilized, it immediately rushed in and continued to chase after Chu Mu and Shui Yinling. The power of the wormhole was shocking, and its speed was unbelievably fast. In less than 10 breaths, Chu Mu and Shui Yinling were out of the wormhole. Ling, Chu Mu shouted as soon as he got out of the wormhole. He quickly looked around, but he didn't see Shui Yinling. His face darkened. After a while, he slowly recovered. His thoughts were quickly straightened out. After he and Shui Yinling entered the wormhole was attacked. A slight vibration caused the wormhole's power to become unstable. The 2 of them couldn't resist the power of the wormhole and were separated. The wormhole contained the mysteries of time and space. A slight difference could lead to thousands of miles of difference. The two of them had no choice but to be separated. Fortunately, their minds were connected. If something happened to the other, their minds would have some reaction, such as feeling uneasy. Now, Chumu's mind was very calm, which meant that Shui Yinling was fine. Chumu believed this feeling. This was one thing. He had a strong desire to kill the person who attacked the space-time wormhole. Fortunately, it was only a slight vibration. If it was more serious, the two of them would have been severely injured, if not killed. If they were injured in the chaotic universe, it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't encounter danger because they lacked enough power to resist. It must be that person from the giant elephant family. Chumu thought, if Ling is injured, I will kill everyone from the giant elephant family. If she is unharmed, I will not let you go. Originally, Chumu didn't feel angry about being hunted. After all, he had killed many people from the giant elephant family. It was normal to be hunted, but now it was different. Letting out a breath, Chumu didn't think about it anymore. He wasn't strong enough yet. He moved and flew forward. There was darkness in front of him. It was so dark that it made people's hearts palpitate. Where is this place? Chumu was very vigilant. He didn't know where the wormhole led to. This place gave him a different feeling than the other end of the wormhole. He kept flying. It could have been months or years. He kept searching, but he didn't find Shui Yinling. Chumu was very disappointed. He quickly adjusted his mentality. As long as she was still alive, they would meet again. The concept of time seemed to become more vague. A loud sound entered his ears and attracted Chumu's attention. After continuing to fly forward for a while, Chumu saw a bright light and was instantly stunned. In front of him, there seemed to be a chain of light. It stretched from one side of the universe to the other. The loud sound was coming from that chain of light. It was like a river that kept running. Universe, Milky Way. Chumu was shocked and muttered to himself. Milky Way was a river in the chaotic universe. It was said that it ran through the entire chaotic universe. Even a demigod sovereign couldn't reach its beginning and end. Some people said that the universe, Milky Way, didn't have a beginning or end. It formed a circle and circulated endlessly. The universe, Milky Way, contained the mysteries of the chaotic universe. It was indispensable. There were many treasures that people yearned for. However, it was very difficult to reach the universe, Milky Way. It usually took a long time. Moreover, one had to be at least in the sovereign realm. The majority of lesser sovereign realm experts wouldn't rush over here as it was too far away. The possibility of encountering danger was very high. However, if they were able to coincidentally encounter a space-time wormhole that was connected to this side of the Cosmos River, they would be considered very lucky. The universe Milky Way is called the origin of life. I should go and see it. Chumu thought. He came here by chance. How could he not go and see it? The glowing link seemed to be very close. However, when he flew over, Chumu knew that it was very far away. Even with his full speed as a sovereign realm expert, he still spent a few months to get close to the universe, Milky Way. The closer he got to the universe, Milky Way, the louder the sound became. It was like a roar that shook his mind. Looking at the universe, Milky Way, not far away, Chumu sucked in a cold breath. His heart was shaken. He seemed to be immersed in it and couldn't extricate himself. The Milky Way, as the name suggested, was a long river. It didn't have a beginning or end. Moreover, it was incomparably vast. Countless starlight flickered in it. Chapter 2377. It was magnificent, mysterious, and full of attraction, making one unable to take their eyes off it and want to plunge into it. As soon as Chumu thought of it, the origin of swordsmanship of the heavens began to revolve on its own. The truth millstone also began to revolve, and the two forces ran through his body, instantly waking him up. He carefully recalled the records he had read in the past about the universe and the Milky Way. The Milky Way is one of the two great rivers of the chaotic universe. It contains the purest aura of the universe, the purest of yang, and is known as the origin of life. It is unique and contains countless treasures. Chu Mu thought to himself, his eyes blazing. The purest of yang contained all the righteousness in the universe, and could almost be said to be the origin of all righteousness in the universe. This was enough to make countless people yearn for it, not to mention the countless treasures it contained. The purest of yang righteousness was not harmful to ordinary cultivators. On the contrary, it was somewhat beneficial. Of course, if one wanted to cultivate in the Milky Way, it would be very dangerous. After all, everything had its limits. The energy in the Milky Way was too extreme, and most cultivators would not be able to bear it and would have to resist it. Resisting it for a long time would consume one's strength, but it would also temper one's strength invisibly. This was one of the benefits. Some cultivators who mainly cultivated evil forces were not suitable to stay in the Milky Way for long periods of time. Otherwise, their evil forces would be destroyed by the righteousness. However, if there was yin, there would be yang, and if there was righteousness, there would be opposites. This was the truth of heaven and earth. Therefore, in the chaotic universe, there was a Milky Way that was said to be the origin of life, which gathered countless righteousness and purest of yang. The nether river of the universe. The nether river of the universe was parallel to the Milky Way, but the direction of the flow of the river was opposite. It was said to be the end of life. It gathered the softest and purest yin forces in the universe, and contained countless evil forces. It was very terrifying. It could be said that in the nether river of the universe, even those who cultivated evil forces did not dare to stay for too long. As for those who did not cultivate evil forces, they did not dare to easily step into the nether river, unless they had treasures or their own power was extremely pure and could resist the corrosion of the nether river. Resistance was only temporary and could not be maintained for too long. In short, without the power of a demigod prime, one could not easily stay in the river for too long, whether it was the heavenly river or the Styx river. My cultivation is at the pinnacle of the lesser dominator realm. In terms of strength, I'm second only to the greater dominator realm. Furthermore, the sword Tao of all heavens that I control contains countless mysteries of the universe. There's no such thing as good or evil. Instead, it includes both. Chu Mu thought to himself, although I can enter the Milky Way, I don't know how long I can stay in it. While secretly guessing, Chu Mu moved. He turned into a beam of sword light and flew towards the universe, heavenly river. Soon, he entered the universe, heavenly river. The moment his body entered the universe, heavenly river, he immediately felt an extremely pure yang energy pouring into his body from every pore in all directions. The purity of this energy made Chu Mu's expression change. He had lived for 200 to 300 years and cultivated to the pinnacle of the lesser dominator realm. He had seen a lot, but this was the first time he felt such pure righteous energy. When the water was too clear, there would be no fish. This kind of energy was too pure and yang. It was a whole new level and a whole new limit. When it rushed into the body, it did not bring benefits but destruction. Chu Mu made a prompt decision and used his own power to resist the righteous energy that rushed into his body. He tried his best to expel it, but the righteous energy continued to pour in and fought against Chu Mu's power. A very pure and powerful energy. Chu Mu stood still and sensed it while resisting the expulsion. If he felt something was wrong, he could leave the Milky Way at any time. I wonder if my truth-seeking technique can refine this kind of energy? Chu Mu thought to himself. When the truth-seeking technique was created, it was originally easier to refine other kinds of energy than other techniques. After the formation of the truth great millstone, it was easier to refine other kinds of energy. The nether energy of the nether realm could be refined, but the righteous energy of the Milky Way was unknown. After all, the difference between the two was too big. Under the circulation of the truth-seeking technique, the truth great millstone also began to rotate. However, the rotation speed of the truth great millstone was very slow, as if it was dragging an ancient and heavy mountain. Chu Mu's expression slightly changed. He only felt that the truth great millstone's rotation was very difficult, as if it was a rusty machine. There was a feeling of overload. Immediately, Chu Mu's face flashed with a touch of joy, because he found that although the rotation of the truth great millstone was very difficult, but after one round of rotation, the righteous energy of the Milky Way that poured into his body was refined. After that, the righteous energy of the Milky Way turned into a pure energy and swept through every part of Chu Mu's body. He immediately felt as if his body had been quenched, and a strange change had taken place. However, the righteous energy of the Milky Way was too little, and the change was very subtle, so Chu Mu could not feel it for a while. Then I will refine more. Chu Mu thought and continued to refine the righteous energy of the Milky Way. The operation of the truth great millstone was very difficult, but with the passage of time, the speed also increased little by little, and the righteous energy of the Milky Way was refined more and more. After being refined, the righteous energy of the Milky Way transformed into an unprecedentedly pure energy and permeated into every part of Chu Mu's body. The more righteous energy of the Milky Way was refined, the more clearly Chu Mu felt the changes in his body. His cultivation did not directly increase, but because his body had absorbed the strange energy, it seemed to have been cleansed time and time again, becoming more transparent and more suitable for the circulation of energy. It also had a stronger attraction to energy. Such a physique was more suitable for cultivation. In other words, after refining the righteous energy of the Milky Way, the pure energy obtained from refining the righteous energy of the Milky Way could be used to improve the innate talent of the cultivator. His yuan qi was also refined and became pure, so its power was naturally more powerful. Not only that, Chu Mu could also feel the changes in other aspects of his physique, although the strength did not increase. But the transfer of power was faster and fiercer, which represented the improvement of his physique. In other words, his physique had also been improved. Chu Mu carefully sensed his mental level again. Similarly, he didn't get any improvement. However, his mental world was transparent and untainted. With a slight thought, his thoughts were like a tide, faster than before. His spirit cultivation talent was also improved. Essence, energy, and spirit were the foundation of most living beings. But other than Chu Mu, it was very difficult to find someone who could cultivate essence, energy, and spirit at the same time. Essence, energy, and spirit are closely related to one's potential. Refining the righteous energy of the Milky Way and improving the essence, energy, and spirit at the same time means increasing one's potential. Does the righteous energy of the Milky Way have such an effect? Or is it because of the truth-seeking technique? Chu Mu secretly guessed. He did not know the situation of others refining the righteous energy of the Milky Way, as he had never seen it in the records. Therefore, he did not know what it would be like for others to refine the righteous energy of the Milky Way. Would it be the same as refining the essence, energy, and spirit to increase one's full potential, or would it only increase a part of it? However, the righteous energy of the Milky Way was extremely pure and domineering. It was already good enough to be able to expel it from the body, let alone refine it. Even many grand dominators would find it difficult to do so. Chu Mu was now at the edge of the Milky Way, where the righteous energy of the Milky Way was the weakest. He did not continue moving forward, but stayed there to continue refining the righteous energy of the Milky Way. It was undoubtedly difficult to resist and refine at the same time, but it would also allow him to better train his control over his own power. He could also increase his potential after refining it, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The water of the Milky Way was not real water, but the accumulation of countless righteous energy. Time flew, and a year passed in the blink of an eye. When Chu Mu felt tired, he would leave the universe's Milky Way to rest. After resting, he would enter the universe's Milky Way again to refine the righteous energy of the Milky Way. In the beginning, he could only refine a little, but after a year, the amount he could refine had increased by more than 10 times. Of course, an increase of 10 times was very little, but it was a huge improvement. Chu Mu could feel that his potential had increased by at least 1 point. To increase one's potential by 1 point in a year was undoubtedly very shocking. Potential was very important to any cultivator. The higher the potential, the higher the level they could reach in the future. Their cultivation techniques and other aspects would also increase. However, potential was innate and could not be changed. Chu Mu only knew that it could increase his potential after refining the righteous energy of the Milky Way. It was a rare opportunity, so he naturally could not miss it. Another year passed in the blink of an eye. Chu Mu had refined more righteous energy of the Milky Way, and his overall potential had increased by 1 point. 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. Chu Mu could easily refine the righteous energy of the Milky Way at the edge of the universe's Milky Way. His potential had also increased by more than 10% in the past 10 years. This kind of increase was calculated in proportion. Therefore, even if everyone who refined the righteous energy of the Milky Way increased by the same proportion, the amount of increase would be different. After all, some people had more potential, while some had less potential. For example, Chu Mu's potential was extremely shocking. His 10% increase might even be better than others' 30 to 50%. I can't increase it anymore. I can only go deeper, Chu Mu said to himself. The deeper he went into the universe's Milky Way, the stronger the righteous energy of the Milky Way, and the harder it was to resist. However, after 10 years of refining, Chu Mu's body had a certain resistance to the righteous energy of the Milky Way, and he could resist it better. In addition, he could better refine the righteous energy of the Milky Way. As he went deeper and deeper, Chu Mu felt the righteous energy of the Milky Way getting stronger and stronger. He allowed his body to adapt bit by bit, and at the same time he carefully observed his surroundings. The universe's Milky Way contained countless treasures. These treasures could be stationary, or they could move quickly with the flow of the righteous energy of the Milky Way. Once he discovered them, he had to act quickly, or he would miss them.